Time to set the stage with the lights off. Let the little nigga breathe till the fight's lost. You ain't never like the room with the bright sauce. Hail Mary, they despise what the light brought. Let them roach niggas bleed if they can't see. sa.neter TV, what you can't be. They say that murder on my mind, now they can't breathe. Take a picture of the crew, that's your last peep. Oh, and need me or love, yeah, that's just me. Keep them jumping like some frogs, so they might be leave with the sunset. And they don't really wanna bleed from the gunplay. And like mine, niggas smoking weed on the one-way street, nigga. Yeah, we see we outside with it. Pull up to debates like we might be with it on guard. Side these niggas like bullshit and they fraud. Let me chop them down with the sword. Walk them down like they live hard. This the toughest you gon' be in, we too hard. And you don't really want that smoke, my G. sa.neter TV, this the toughest environment, the toughest environment, the toughest environment to be in, toughest environment, the toughest environment, the toughest environment to be in, toughest environment, the toughest environment, the toughest environment to be in, toughest environment, the toughest environment, the toughest environment to be in, the toughest environment, the toughest environment, the toughest environment to be in, toughest environment, the toughest environment, the toughest environment to be in. Keep that off your lip before you get flipped. We got sources over here, we don't just spit. Too many bosses over here, y'all just legit. Put them niggas in the game, let them get real. Don't even step unless you come in with that scholarship. That economic tip, gotta make a dollar flip. And I might be next, I don't give a damn, a truth rolling with me, so I'm feeling like the son of man. Too many gon' hate, gotta make a stand. I'm just trying to duck the lake, you don't understand. Read them when I greet them, that's my best plan. Head first shit, I'm just saying. Nigga meet me in LA, oh you just playing. Too many be fake, what the base saying. So I tell them they don't want no smoke before they end up in the newspaper next day. Smoke, this the toughest environment, the toughest environment, the toughest environment to be in. Toughest environment, the toughest environment, the toughest environment to be in. Toughest environment, the toughest environment, the toughest environment to be in. Toughest environment, the toughest environment, the toughest environment to be in. The toughest environment, the toughest environment,
like the video, thumb up the video.
Toughest environment, the toughest environment, the toughest environment to be in. Toughest environment, the toughest environment, the toughest environment to be in. Toughest environment, the toughest environment, the toughest environment to be in. And this is it right here. The toughest you gon' ever be in. You wasn't conscious before us. Y'all niggas was asleep. We woke the sleeping giant. We did it. sa.neter TV. So stay your ass in your little bitty box where you feel safe. Cause there's motherfucking monsters over here. Real monsters.
Peace and Pan-Africanism to Brother Herman Smalls in the toughest environment you can be in.
All right, here we go. Enough of the talk. The talk is over. It's time to show and prove. And first, let me lay down the rules. There is absolutely no profanity, no slandering each other, and no name calling. We are all grown men. The people are over here to learn something, to get some information. Now, when one person is speaking, you cannot be interrupted by the other brother. Even if you feel that he says something that you didn't say, you can clear it up on your own time. The time will not be stopped. You will be given 15 minutes in your first, second, third, and possible fourth round, because this is so important that y'all might need a fourth round to go into to get all this information out for the people. You will have 3 minutes in your opening. 3 minutes in your opening to let the people know what it is you are here to prove. And then after your third round, you will have a Q&A where you can ask each other questions, right? Where y'all could go back and forth. And then we will open it up for the guests if y'all would like that to ask y'all questions. And then we will have a 5-minute to close out. Are there any questions? Elder Yarah, Brother Reginald, are there any questions?
No, I'm good, brother.
Elder Yarah?
No questions.
Okay. So being that Brother Reginald is the challenger, he's calling out the people who can whoever can defeat this topic that he's coming with. Brother Reginald, let me get my timer. All right, the time will start when you start. You got 3 minutes in your opening round. Hold on, let me get my timer set up. Okay, we ready. You got 3 minutes in your opening round for your opening. Right. The time will start when you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready.
You gonna use your slides or just talk?
I'm just gonna talk right now. So I'm let me pull up my slides. So
I see it. Your slides is up. Your slides is up. You're already up. But you're just gonna talk right now.
Yeah. So do you see the full screen slide?
No, I see it is up, but I don't need to show it yet because you're just talking, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So I see it. Whenever you're ready to get them, we got them right there. Okay. So time will start when you start talking.
All right. So for centuries, people have been told that Jesus was a real historical figure, a man who walked the earth, performed miracles, and executed by Rome and rose from the dead. Today, my opponent must do what no one has done in 2,000 years, provide hard historical evidence that Jesus Christ actually existed. If Jesus was a real man, where is the contemporary Roman or Jewish record of his life? Where is the trial record from Pontius Pilate, who we know existed? Where is a single eyewitness account, not from decades later, but from someone who actually saw him? The truth? Not one contemporary document from Jesus' own time confirms his existence. Yet, Rome kept detailed records of far lesser known criminals and tax collectors. Pontius Pilate, the man who supposedly sentenced Jesus to death, is historically verified. Yet there is no record of him executing Jesus. If Jesus was publicly executed as a threat to Rome, why does his history remain silent? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If my opponent wants to argue that Jesus was real, he must provide one contemporary eyewitness account from Jesus' own time, one Roman or Jewish record confirming his trial and crucifixion, one external independent source proving his miracles. If he cannot provide these, then by his own burden of proof, he must concede that Jesus Christ is not a verified historical figure. He cannot use the Bible or any sources based on the Bible, any references to Jesus that relies on scripture, church writings, theological interpretations, or religious tradition. This is a historical debate, not a theological discussion. If Jesus is real, his existence should provide outside religious texts, should be provable outside religious texts. If Jesus is not historical, then what is he? Christianity did not emerge in isolation. It inherited a distorted, older mythological tradition, especially from ancient Egypt. Christianity did not create Jesus. It repackaged ancient wisdom and presented it as historical fact. Why does the man who allegedly changed history leave no trace in history? If Jesus was unique, why does his history or story match Egyptian spiritual teachings step by step? If Christianity came first, why does every major event in Jesus' life have an older mythological counterpart in Kemet? The burden is on my opponent. If he cannot meet this challenge, then the only reasonable conclusion is this: Jesus Christ is not a historical person. He is a theological construct based on older mythologies. That's my opening. Hello?
Yes, I see you had 12 seconds left. That's good. You finished on time. Elder Yarah, you are up next. 3 minutes in your opening, and your time will start as soon as you start speaking.
All right. First, giving all praises to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to Yeshua Mashiach, our Savior and Rabbi and great teacher. Shout out to the HOK family, sa.neter. Shout out to Brother Reginald for what he believes is such a arduous challenge, and peace to him for thinking so. But let's look forward and directly to this challenge. This is not a challenge or questions that has not been posed for over 2,000 years. These things have been debated. Some portions of what he gave in his opening has been debated, but a lot of it has not been debated, and we're going to show and prove that. If Jesus was not a historical figure, why do we not have for the first 2,000 years of his life no one ever postulating that idea? But there are many extra biblical sources. Since he wants to remove this argument away from the biblical narrative that has been by scholars. And mind you, he says this is a historical debate, which means that it's now taken out of the realm of theology. Since theology can't be used, theological interpretations can't be used, he has taken this argument outside of that and brought it into a field of study, a historical field of study that many PhD scholars and the consensus of scholars in most modern times have already come to the conclusion that Jesus himself was a historical figure. And I'm going to base my argument on those particular texts that they use historically by the PhD scholars who studied this extensively. And for over 2,000 years, they all agree. Even his detractors, or those who say Jesus was not who he said he was in real life, but they never, ever say, not in one document, not one argument against Christ, not one argument against Christianity, not one argument against the movement for over 2,000 years. No one ever said he did not exist. Number two, no one ever said in over 2,000 years that he was created or made up by man. None of that exists. None of that exists. If, as my opponent said, that Jesus was a creation that destroyed or brought down or was brought against the Roman Empire, it would have been easy for them to record in their own records and simply state that this fictitious, this false, this fallacious person was created to simply destroy Rome. But you know what? There is no evidence. There is no documentation, as my brother said. The Romans kept great records. If anything that challenged Rome was this great, why wouldn't they never say he never existed? Why wouldn't they just simply say he was made up? They did not do that. And we're going to show that today.
All right, my brother Reginald, get ready. You got your first 15 minutes in the first round.
All right.
Your slide presentation is up, and time will start. Time will begin when you start talking.
All right, so let's roll. So Jesus is not historical. He is a man-made history. So he is a myth. All right. So that's where I'm going with this. Let me make sure I got my deal going here. Okay. So so first part of this deal is that that the idea that Jesus was historical. So in Rebirth for Christianity, Alvin Boyd Kuhn says, however, it will be claimed that there must be surely a word of evidence beyond the content of the Gospels themselves. Yet it is a matter of fact that the eye of scholarship has searched the files of history to the last document in the last monastic library. And all that has ever been written on the matter comprises 24 lines. So in other words, so for such a famous figure that is said to do extraordinary things between 0 to 33 CE, there is almost no historical record of his existence, except lines that are forgeries at worst and suspect at best. The only place this miracle worker exists is in the Bible. Without faith-based beliefs, he disappears. He continues, so Rebirth in Christianity. Nowhere else does the field of history turn up any evidence as to the existence of Jesus. During the lifetime of this heavenly emissary who visit to earth was to save humanity, and for close to 200 years thereafter, not one line appears in the records of history that can be accepted as true chronicle of his life story. Continuing, it's not extraordinary that of the thousands, is it not extraordinary that of the thousands of Judeans who, as the narrative has it, witnessed the marvels performed by Jesus, the miracle of feeding of 5,000, for instance, not one letter has ever been found to have been written by an eyewitness to some friend or relative telling of the marvelous event. This is such a departure from normal human reaction in the circumstances that it strongly suggests that non-faculty of these miracles. There is absolutely no biblical evidence of Jesus Christ. So to gain to this again, it should be added that most of these works of wonder duplicated by those to be found in old Egyptian manuscripts, always in the form of allegories. There is in fact no corroborative eyewitness evidence of any event in Jesus's life. Now, we have here the independent historical evidence of Pontius Pilate, which is from 26 CE, okay, to 36 CE. He existed. This has been confirmed. Pontius Pilate is historically confirmed, yet Jesus is not. Pilate was a Roman prefect responsible for legal proceedings. He supposedly ordered Jesus' execution, yet left no record of it. Why is this dude that's supposed to have left record did he not just do his job? I mean, Romans documented criminals and rebels, so why is Jesus missing? The simple task for my opponent is to provide external proof, independent historical evidence that proves that Jesus existed. Not people saying that he didn't exist. That doesn't get it, because a lot of people are going to argue the point. But do you have independent historical evidence, contemporary eyewitness documentation written during his lifetime, Roman, Jewish, or historical records verifying his existence? So there's an ancient template that predates Christianity. So the biblical Jesus Christ is not unique. It's from the Kemetic and Platonic soul point of view. The soul descends into matter to awaken to divinity. Christianity flipped this, okay? Christianity flipped from a soul point of view to a physical when it corporealized the Christ. That's the KRST. Is the story of Jesus unique? No. The ancient Kemetic soul point of view will help make sense when you see it from that perspective. We got to think how the ancients thought. In other words, the metaphysical world is the primary world the soul came from and entered into the physical world. The story of Jesus Christ is a composite of two Egyptian neters, Horus and Osiris. Now, what people might not know is that early Egyptologists were Christian and based the age of the pyramids on this Christian bishop's work based on the chronology of biblical mythical Adam and Eve. Bishop James T. Usher theorized that God created Earth on this date and time, 4004 BCE, October 23rd, 9 a.m. And all he did was added the chronology of the people from Adam and Eve. Okay, so he assumed Adam and Eve was literal as well. Because early Egyptologists were literalists, most people have no idea that these dates were set like this. So the science says Earth is 4 billion years old, but Egyptologists say it's only about 6,000 years old based on Adam and Eve. But there is new evidence proving the pyramids is well over 10,000 years old. This geologist, Robert Schoch, proved the pyramids of ancient Egypt are older than Egyptologists believed, okay? Robert Schoch research proved that the pyramids and Sphinx are older than 10,000 years based on climate data, all right? So now, next section. So this is the framework that Jesus came from. This is where everything was set up. So the ancient framework that precedes Yeshua or Jesus and connects Horus and Osiris to Christianity and many others. Now, the hammer of faith and belief through cognitive bias blinds Christians to the spiritual ancient science of mythology. Like all apologists, My opponent is not searching for truth. He's searching for confirmation of his beliefs. He believes in Jesus. He has faith that Jesus was historical. Because of this, anything that contradicts his faith is a threat. He cannot entertain any ideas that suggest Jesus was not historical. This is where Maslow's hammer comes in. Maslow was a psychologist. His hammer states that if the only tool you have is a hammer, you will treat everything as if it were a nail. My opponent's only tool is literalism. He can only think in terms of history, not metaphor, because he only sees mythology as fiction. He cannot recognize its deeper meaning. When he looks at the myths of Osiris, Horus, and Jesus, he only looks at the surface details. The stories don't match word for word, or if the stories don't match word for word, action for action, he assumes there is no connection. But here's the problem. The myth is not the message. The story itself is not what matters. It's the function of the characters in the story. Mythology is the ancient science of universal spiritual principles told through different cultural symbols. Osiris, Horus, and Jesus are not identical stories, but they serve the same functions as myths expressing deeper meaning. They represent the soul's journey, the descent into matter, and the resurrection of divine consciousness. Because my opponent does not understand mythology, he dismisses its clear connection to the universal function Jesus represents in the story. Christianity forced us to turn off our own faculties of logic and not trust our own intuition to accept absurdities on faith. But I will show biblical Jesus is not history. He is mythology that has been rewritten and repackaged. Moving forward, I will not ask you to do mental logical gymnastics. Just ask yourself a simple question. Does it make sense? The evidence will be undeniable. Now here is Larry Scranton, and he did some research on ancient cosmological symbolism. And this is from the Cosmological Origins of Myth and Symbol. And he says, one goal of a good software design is to provide the next programmer with the built-in clues to the meaning of concepts, symbols that define software programs. Another is to make the system predictable to the next programmer by following consistent methods. Once we accept the proposition of ancient cosmology as a design system, we begin to actively seek out various kinds of clues that might ultimately help us understand. Now, here's the template. This is the first major clue to the system, to the mythological system. It's Platonic theopathy. The stories that Christianity turned into history existed thousands of years before Christianity. Platonic theopathy predates Christianity by centuries, yet it follows the same spiritual structure. Plato was not inventing something new. He was distilling ancient Egyptian teachings into a framework that already existed in the ancient world. Here's where it becomes undeniable. The same pattern, emanation, incarnation, dismemberment, reminiscence repeats this spiritual tradition worldwide. Ancient cultures express this framework through their own mythologies, each with unique symbols and deities, but the same underlying spiritual structure. The key for the esoteric adept is to uncover the hidden framework beneath the story. Osiris, Horus, Dionysus, Krishna, and Jesus all follow this framework. Yet only one, Jesus, is claimed to be a literal historical figure. If the spiritual template existed for thousands of years, why is Jesus the only one mistaken for a real person? The truth is clear. Jesus is not history. He's mythology, rewritten as false history. So emanation is basically when the light of the creator. So the one is the first cause of all, the cosmic fire that represents the creator's life force, his intelligence, his intellect. This life force descends through nature as it goes through 4 stages. Emanation as a divine spark infused as part of the universe and all of nature. All the universe is unified through this divine spark. Nature is it, and it is nature. Okay, it's Ra, Elohim, Allah. Okay, incarnation, where this fire, this light that is the intellect of the all, is often personified as a type of messenger that becomes the translator between heaven and earth. Horus, Moses, Hermes, and Jesus are examples of this fire and intellect that incarnates into the physical. Dismemberment breaks divine unity into fragments that become different aspects of the psyche of the messenger. The number 12 becomes prominent, representing the idea of the fragmented fire. Thoth, the human personality, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 disciples. Reminiscence is to consciously awaken to the forgotten memories of our divine origin. This is the idea of resurrection and where it comes from. Okay? Now, Platonic theosophy is Egyptian spiritual science. It links Egypt, or the Greeks are linked to Christianity through from Egypt. So Egypt,
3 minutes. 3 minutes.
Then ancient Egypt. The utterly misleading way the Egyptian physics are converted by Plato and his followers into Greek metaphysics makes Platonism another name for an imposter. Okay, so this is a Geromancy natural genesis. Now, this is the area that all of this is happening in. Okay, people were learning and talking to each other for hundreds of years in this area from the 6th century BCE to the 4th century CE. Would it be far-fetched to believe that they passed around the same ideas? Platonic theosophy shows this is what happened. The same basic framework told many different ways. Does it make sense that Christianity formed in this area and not have been influenced by it? So mythologists and poets. Christianity turns symbolic metaphors into rigid history, stripping away their true meaning. Ancient mythicists and poets never wrote literally. They encoded spiritual science into stories that express deeper metaphysical truths. Darkness eclipses and the soul's descent. The darkness over the land at Jesus' crucifixion is not history. It's a symbol of the soul's descent into matter. In mythological traditions, darkness represents ignorance, separation from the divine, and spiritual trials. Ancient writers used natural cycles, eclipses, the sun setting, and celestial movements as allegories for transformation. Just as the sun disappears at each night before rising again, the soul experiences a descent into the underworld, the physical incarnation, before remembering its divine nature. Ancient myths were never about a one-time historical event.
1 minute.
They were timeless spiritual blueprints. Christianity corrupted these metaphors, forcing people to believe in a literal event rather than understanding the esoteric message. By turning symbolic resurrection into a physical event, the church externalized salvation, making people believe they needed an institution to reach God rather than their own inner transformation. Why this myth empowers? Literalism, or myth empowers and literalism enslaves. Understanding mythology allows us to apply wisdom to our own lives. Christian literalism locks people into blind faith, demanding obedience rather than self-knowledge. The crucifixion and resurrection are not historical events. They represent the entire eternal cycle of spiritual awakening. Christianity hijacks ancient wisdom, erased it and metaphysical truths, and replaced them with a system of control. The crucifixion myth was never about one man suffering for our sins. It was always about the journey of the soul, our soul.
Time.
And I'll stop it right there.
All right. Yes, sir. All right, Elder Yarah. Let's turn on that camera. And Brother Reginald Martin have drew first blood, brother. First blood. It is now on you, Elder Yarah. Time will start when you're ready, brother. You got? I don't see your presentation yet, Elder Yarah.
I'm about to share it now.
Okay.
Let me see.
I see it coming up. And bang, there it is. Time will start when you're ready, brother. Yes, sir. It's up and running. I see it.
All right. Let me do this real quick. make it a little bit bigger for me. All right, so I'm ready.
Time will start when you start speaking.
Yeah, I'm ready. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you, brother. I hear you.
Sa.neter. Oh, okay. No doubt. All right. Again, as I thought, we weren't going to see anything new here, but really, let's get into his challenge. First of all, I want the audience and everybody's listening to really pay attention to the initial challenge that he put out. He put out that this debate has to be one of history, none of which he just gave in his opening round. So I'm really not going to rebut here. But what he did was, and this is where I feel like that the debate is already over, is that he shows us a slide of James Ussher and talks about James Ussher's belief in a biblical and theological sense. James Ussher is only known for that. So what he has come to this debate to do was to say he wants to argue against history, but yet he immediately in his initial opening goes to faith. He goes to theology to prove his stance. So even in this debate, he can't even hold his own parameters and understanding of the concept of the challenge he even put out himself. And so if we were in a court of law, as he initially tried to frame this by talking about a belief beyond a reasonable doubt, or a belief or evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, that you cannot go and use a biblical source, you cannot use scripture, you cannot use theological interpolation, but he immediately goes directly to that. If we were in the court of law, you would have opened the door for the defense, right? You being the challenger, for me as the defendant, to come into the court of law and actually be able to now say, since you've opened that door into theology, since you opened that door into biblical interpretation and interpretation, now any evidence that I bring forward now can also come from that same field. If we were actually in a court of law, if you even actually understood the debate you wanted to have, which I knew it was a debate you could not actually hold true to without bringing in biblical interpretation, theological interpretation, because what you fail to do here is establish your own premise outside of the biblical narrative. It's impossible for you to do that and argue against the historicity of Yeshua. I knew that would be the mistake you would make. So let's talk about the history of Jesus and extra biblical evidence. Let's talk about that. What he doesn't understand as well is that there is a legal standard of beyond a reasonable doubt that exists, right? We're going to get to that. But there's also a methodology in proving and showing the historical or the historicity that Yeshua or Jesus the Christ or Yahushua, as some may determine him to be, was a historical figure. But let's talk about where your idea is not original, and but this argument has been had for thousands of years. The discipline of historical Jesus, that's an actual historical study, family. He should have gone into this methodology and disproved this methodology instead of giving us all of the fluff, right? And giving us the zeitgeist argument. But the discipline of historical Jesus study suffers from the legacy of René Descartes, who proposed methodic doubt as a principle of all knowledge. That is, in his view, what can be doubted must be doubted. Descartes wanted absolute certainty before he would assent to anything. And this is what a lot of these guys do, especially my opponent. They want absolute proof. They want absolute proof. No matter what evidence you bring towards them, they want absolute proof. They'll dismiss what the scholars say. They'll dismiss what the consensus of scholars say, which he's already done. He wants a blood sample. He wants a fingerprint. Let's talk about it.
In historical Jesus studies, one methodological principle that expresses this Cartesian doubt is the principle of dissimilarity. And we're going to talk about what that is. This is how you have a historical Jesus debate, not giving us the zeitgeist argument. This principle stipulates that if something Jesus said or did is dissimilar to what early followers of Jesus believe, then it can be trusted. Jesus' baptism is usually taken as an example that passes the test because it seems to make Jesus inferior to John, contrary to early religious beliefs. But we won't go into the Bible today. Now, on the surface, such a procedure makes sense. But when the procedure is turned the other way, it becomes problematic. Watch this. That is when Jesus says, or when he does things that are similar to what the early followers of Jesus believe, these things, events, must be rejected as simply early Christian propaganda, writing their own beliefs into the lips of Jesus. Such a procedure exhibits a hermeneutic of suspicion. This is dubious at a basic historical level, as renowned New Testament scholars N.T. Wright has pointed out. The real Jesus must be the historical bridge between Judaism and first century Israelite followers of Christ. In other words, why in the world would we ever assume that there should be no continuity between the founder, Jesus, and the movement of the followers of the way, or some would call Christians, right, that he gave rise to? We have to look at it as historical methodology, people. But we should ask the historical question differently, not seeking absolute certainty as this brother is doing, but seeking reasonable belief. That's the question that he has. And he opens the door to reasonable belief the moment he uses James Ussher, a bishop of the Catholic Church. Why would you try to pigeonhole theology, but use theology as a basis for your argument? That is a poor attempt at trying to subvert this debate into what you think it should be, simply because you have no real evidence to the argument that Jesus did not exist. But we're here for the actual evidence, right? After all, history, especially ancient history, is all about accepting someone's testimony regarding happenings to which we were not privy. Just as all of the information he tried to shove at us about Jesus' connection to ancient Kemet and other mythicisms, he himself was not there. He's only relying on writings of others whom he has no evidence that they did not create any of the mythology that he thinks is proof against the historicity of Christ. He's only basing his arguments off belief. He doesn't understand that his entire argument is one based on faith, right? That is, certitude is simply not an appropriate standard for history. Rather, history moves between levels of plausibility and probability. And that is what the information that we do have, the extra biblical sources that we do have for Yeshua, Jesus of Christ, gives us the standard for history. What a historical person is based on levels of plausibility and probability. That is reasonable belief. We should ask whether the testimony of the Gospels makes sense within the context of first century Judaism. It is the familiarity we would expect an eyewitness with regard to Palestinian geography, Jewish customs, culture, and the political situation on the ground. But we won't go into the Bible. We're going to try to hold true to what our brother needs in order for him to understand and discuss his reasonable belief, because he does not have reasonable doubt. He has reasonable belief, right? So in other words, are the Gospels consistent with what we know about the period? As Brant Petrie said quite well, if a saying or deed attributed to Jesus contextually plausible, coherent with other evidence about Jesus, and provides a plausible cause for the practice and belief of the early church, then it is reasonable to conclude that the evidence in question is historical. Petrie, Jesus, and the Last Supper, right? Page 41. But guess what? we will not go into the biblical scripture to talk about it. What we're going to do is we're going to show the extra biblical sources that provides us with a historical, plausible, and probable outcome for the history of Yeshua, right? He talks about reasonable doubt. The probability in the unknown criminal law philosophy, H. Jalima, talks about that if you go into the origins of reasonable doubt, it was actually based on a Christian idea. Why? Because jurors were afraid that if they passed judgment on someone, that they would be in violation of the teachings of the Bible. So reasonable doubt was offered to them as a way to not feel condemned for passing judgment on others. You can find this in the reasonable doubt, robust evidential probability, and the unknown criminal law. So again, when he talks about reasonable doubt, he doesn't really understand that the origins of reasonable doubt comes from a Christian narrative. He doesn't really understand that, right? What is the legal standard of beyond a reasonable doubt? In legal proceedings, which he's already failed by opening the door with James Usher, a theologian, which he just said, you can't really prove Jesus. If you can't prove Jesus with theology, you can't prove no Jesus using theology. It makes no sense why he would even use that. In legal proceedings, the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt requires a high degree of certainty, but not absolute certainty, right? Even one of the most famous mythicists who I've had the ability to speak directly to on this channel, our good brother, the mythicist, I can't even recall his name right now. Richard Carrier, there it is. Richard Carrier even says himself that even though he doesn't believe that Jesus was a historical figure, a flesh and blood or corporeal person, he says there is a 33% chance of plausibility and probability that he did exist. Because if you actually take the honest information and look at the historicity of Jesus, you cannot say absolutely he did not exist if you're going to be a scholar and academic concerning the history of Jesus.
3 minutes.
Which historical figure has the most evidence of existence? Some scholars estimate that there are about 30 surviving independent sources written by 25 authors who attest to Jesus. This is Bar Ehrman, October 28, 2016, Gospel Evidence to Jesus. To establish the existence of a person without any assumption, one source from another author, either a supporter or opponent, is needed for Jesus. There are at least 12 independent sources from 5 authors from supporters and 2 independent sources from 2 authors from non-supporters within a century of the crucifixion. That is an established ground to prove historicity of an individual themselves right there. If you're actually having a historical debate, not a fake zeitgeist debate. Since historical sources or other named individuals from first century Galilee were written by either supporters or enemies, these sources on Jesus cannot be dismissed. And the existence of at least 14 sources from at least 7 authors means there is much more evidence available for Jesus than for any other notable person from first century Galilee. This is Ken Dark, 2023. His argument that Jesus was somehow a worldwide phenomenon is fallacious. He was only relegated to the area which we know as Galilee and its surrounding areas. How would he have been worldwide during the time of his life? No one ever said Jesus went off to Guam, or he went off to Peru, or he went off to the Incas, or to what we understand, Mexico, or to the North Americas. Nobody ever makes that claim.
1 minute.
That is not even one historically accurate to even create. So this argument that Jesus was well known, if he was so well known, then how come no one wrote about him? Because he wasn't well known during his lifetime. He wasn't. History tells us that. So squash that fallacious argument, right? With at least 14 sources by believers and non-believers with a century of the crucifixion, there is much more evidence available for Jesus than for other notable people than from first century Galilee, right? Let me go down, and I'll stop on my next round, right? Because I want to talk about the criteria of dissimilarity. In this debate, I will be addressing the historicity of Jesus of Nazareth. Did he exist? There is ample evidence to suggest that he did indeed live early in the first century. We won't be using the New Testament.
Time.
Right? But
Time.
we will be using the methodology of the criteria of dissimilarity. Be ready, brother.
All right, family. We are into another round, going into the second round. Brother Reginald, are you ready, brother? Time will start when you're ready.
Let's roll. All right. So first of all
right,
bringing in James T. Usher actually established a timeline, because the brothers want to say that everything, that there is no connection, that nothing.
All right, you're not sharing nothing, right? Are you sharing something? Time out. Let me start this over. Are you sharing anything? I see it.
I have my slide up on my tomb right now.
All right, you ready?
So do you see my slide right now?
Yes, your slides is up.
Okay, cool.
Time start.
All right. So talking about the brother and sharing James T. Usher, that establishes a timeline. It has absolutely nothing to do with faith. So he spent all this time critiquing what I did, but family, notice he never gave any historical evidence. He's trying to set his own parameters so he can wiggle in something that has nothing to do, that happened between 0 and 33 CE. Okay, so he's talking all of this stuff, but he gave you no historical firsthand evidence, no eyewitnesses, no nothing. Okay, I am not talking about faith, but I know how to establish a timeline. And that's what I did with James T. Usher, okay? Showing that this knowledge that I am sharing with you is thousands of years old and existed thousands of years before Christianity, and Christianity copied it and then distorted it. That's the deal. Now you have to prove that Jesus exists. I'm not proving that he don't exist. I already know he doesn't. But I'm showing you where the information came from. That's what I'm doing here. You need to bring some documentation that's not 10, 30, 40, 50, 100, 200 years after his supposed death. Yes, it needs to be absolute evidence, because that's how history works. I have been a history teacher. I know how history works. Thank you very much. Prove it. Prove that he exists with documented evidence. Absolute yes. That's what you need to do. Otherwise, it's all mythology. So you're seeing here an image of Atum. So what I'm going to show you here is how the name Jesus first came about and what he is. You have to understand the mythology and the functions of the sa.neters that the ancients were expressing. All right. So Atum is the theory of basically what existed before what we might call the Big Bang today. Okay. So he was the initial fire or spark of the creator, the begetter. Okay. Numerologically, he was the one, the monad. He connected the principle of Shu and Tefnut as the mirror. Okay. So he was the origin of this. So he was the beginning of all elements which make visible the invisible. This is what the ancients were explaining. They were explaining a spiritual science that is applicable to all of us, not one special human being. All right. So Atum is the fire, or the lake of fire, where souls are born. Okay. That's a shift from Christianity, because they're telling us that we can go to, the Christianity teaches that we can go to hell. But the ancients actually taught that everything comes from a lake of fire, that's the first cause of all. The fire, the intellect of the creator. That's what the ancients were expressing. Okay. So Atum is the proverbial lake of fire which souls are born in. All right. Now, this is where we first get to the name Yeshua. because Atum is also one of the first trinities. Yehusa is the ever-coming Son of God, meaning he is the light of perpetual, that is perpetual or eternal in nature. So this light of fire is the ever-coming Son. So where did the idea that Jesus coming back originate? From the spiritual science of ancient Egypt, okay? So in the book, The Great Myth of the Sun Gods, Alvin Boyd Kuhn says, whence comes the S in Jesus' name? This is of great importance. He derived from the Egyptian suffix written either S-A, S-E, S-I, S-U, S-A-F, S-E-F, S-I-F, or S-U-F. Okay, the name Saf, Sef, Sif, Suf, and meaning the son, heir, prince, or successor to the father. The F is an Egyptian ending for the masculine singular. When the original symbol of divinity, I-O or I-E, J-O or J-E, was combined with the Egyptian suffix for the succeeding heir, S-U or S-A, the resultant was the name Yehusa, Yehisu, okay, Yehisi, or Yosi, Yesu, Yesu, Yosef, Yosef, and Yosef. So the Y's and the I's were pronounced the same back then. One of the many forms of Yesu and another was Joseph. The final F was silent at the time and gave the eventual form of Jesus. The name then meant the divine son, and combined with the Egyptian IU, the idea of the coming one. Hence, Jesus was the Messiah. He was the coming son of the divine life. There was in Egypt for 10,000 years BC, before 6,000 years before the supposed life of Adam and Eve, the character of this functionary under the name of Yehusa. So again, it's about the function, how these are ideas about how the universe functions. Okay, it was science, spiritual science is what they were doing. So the ancient Egyptian Yehusa or Yehusu, Yehu the Sa, became the name Yeshua. That's where the idea of he was the idea of the perpetual renewal, the child that was always ever coming. Okay, so that's where the idea of Jesus coming back from. This was years, thousands of years before Christianity. Now, Egyptians didn't use fixed names. Their words were tonal and were like vibrational recipes. The Greeks altered these names, changing spiritual science into their distorted doctrines that Christianity distorted more. So at the abstract level, we have masculine, feminine, and child, which child is the perpetual renewal. The initial creation of the universe, Atum, Yehuseus, Yehusa, or Jesus, and perpetual renewal. At the metaphysical level, we have Asar, Aset, Heru, perpetual renewal. At the physical level, Ptah, Sekhmet, Nefertum. Okay, Nefertum, Heru, Jesus, Yehusa, child, they are all the same idea, but the tonal language is what determined which level that the ancients were talking about. Okay, sound creates form. So in the beginning was the word, the logos. The word esoterically means vibration. The word and any word is scientifically a vibrational complex. Okay. The ancient Africans, because the Egyptian language was tonal, they did not like the Greeks changing the name of the netters. And this one African says, because is saying to the Greeks, because the Greeks, O king, have but empty discourses, good for producing demonstrations, and therein lies all the philosophy of the Greeks. A clamor of words as for the Egyptians, who do not use simple words, but sounds all filled with power. Family, there is a metaphysical component to this knowledge, okay? It's not literal. It's meant to be something that's developed within inside us. Now, let's talk about the Eucharist and the divine consciousness, okay? The dismemberment of Osiris. This is where the idea of Jesus, the body and blood of Jesus comes from. So the hidden meaning of the divine presence throughout creation is what this is about. So again, in the Rebirth of Christianity, Alvin Boyd Kuhn says, to take only one example, the church asserts that Jesus instituted the blessed sacrament of the Eucharist. Yet for ages before him, tribes of the forest and sea owls had been partaking in the body and blood of their gods in the assurance that they endowed them with eternal life, just like we used to have to do on the first of every Sunday, okay? At every heart of its most sacred rite, the sacrament of the Eucharist, Christian blindness to its allegorical implications has resulted in the failure to grasp one of the cardinal principles of ancient theology. This is the document of dismemberment of bodies of gods because of their incarnation into mortal flesh. Their descent from higher planes of being into the physical world necessitated progressive fragmentation of their primary unitary power into lesser units at each successive downward step. Since the weaker vessels could contain only a small fraction of the heavenly fire. In other words, the fire dispersed as it went further and further down because smaller units could only accept a small portion of it. All right. Hence, in every mythology, the bodies of the gods were represented as being cut into pieces so that all creatures might be endowed with the physical life. Generally, the pieces were scattered over the land and buried, emblematic of a sacrificial death to which God submitted mortals. All right. So why is the number 12 so prevalent? There are many tales of gods mutilating their bodies and shedding their blood for mankind. Great significance was attached to the number of the pieces which the divine nature was divided. The most common number being 12, as man is said to be destined to bring to perfection 12 aspects of divinity. All right. So let's move to Christianity, where they transformed and changed these ideas, where they literalized them, and where they took mythology and literalized it. So this is linking Christianity to the Gnostics, and the Gnostics to the Gnostics to ancient Egypt. This knowledge comes from ancient Egypt, and this was a minister who says in his book "Pioneers of Religious Thought" by Frederick D. Kirshner, the Gnostics were the founders of Christian theology. Gnostics learned from ancient Egyptians. In the full sense of the word, for 10 or more decades, they dominated the field of religious thought. This fact helped us to understand our records for the first and second centuries of Christian history, why it's so meager. So he's trying to explain why Christian history is so meager, why there is no documentation. My opponent wants to say that there's all kinds of documentation about Jesus in the first century. There's not. There's people writing after the supposed death that then talks about him later because they needed to make something up to try to make him look like he was historical, family. That's it. An absence of evidence does not mean that Jesus existed. That's the opposite of logic. Okay? So he's trying to prove that, but the idea that there is no link to Christianity and Egypt is absolutely, utterly ridiculous. Okay. Here we have a rod and a staff.
3 minutes.
Okay? What did this look like? Okay. So the early Christian fathers did not believe in a flesh and blood Jesus. Up to the 3rd century in Christianity, while there prevailed a strong trend toward Gnosticism and Greek philosophy in the schools and doctrines of the church, symbolism and allegorism held a very high place in exegesis, preeminently so in the work of the two most illuminated patristics, Clement of Alexandria and his pupil Origen. Particularly, Origen's allegories became later a bone of contention between partisans in the church, and as a result fell under fierce denunciation from the Orthodox parties, and finally were excommunicated by the decrees of the councils within the 6th century. Origen steadfastly maintained that beneath the letter of scriptural texts, to be discerned by a more cultivated spiritual intuition, lay a deeper stratum of meaning, which was true and a vital message more obvious to the literal. In other words, he's saying that taking it literal actually robs us of what this true spiritual knowledge is supposed to be. My opponent wants to talk about how I'm bringing in the Bible. Dude, I'm telling you where this information came from that went into the Bible. I'm not talking about faith. I'm showing where the connection is and how Jesus in the Bible came about and was twisted, plain and simple. So the early Gnostics, the church was Gnostic. There is a direct link to the Gnostics from ancient Egypt and their teachers. So all that is in the Bible and all that became a part of Christianity was first from ancient Egypt. That's the point. And it was based in the mythological ideas and the spiritual science.
1 minute.
Spiritual principles. That's what this idea is about. A deeper level of knowledge and literal interpretations cannot touch. The greater and even lesser mysteries of Christianity must have dealt with the subjects that lay far over the realm of esoteric truth, having little connection with the outer story of the Gospels. There is bluntly nothing to be esoteric or mysterious about the direct narrative of gospel Christianity. If the early church had its higher mysteries in its, is certain that they were of the same general nature as those of the pagan Greece and Egypt. Greeks stole from Egypt. Greek philosophy began where it is a misnomer, for there is no such philosophy in existence. The Greeks changed things, and then Christianity changed them more. That's the instance that we're talking about here. The Gospels were originally they were epistles that were transmitted. They actually were orally transmitted. Okay, I can stop there.
Time. All right, Elder Yarah, as you get ready for your second round, let me read this donation through in as Elder Yarah gets ready for his second round. Captain Tazariak is on the phone calling me, hitting me up. All right. Elder Yarah, are you ready? Time will start when you begin. Your presentation is not up yet, Yarah. I see it.
Let me see it.
I see it.
Okay, I'm ready right now. So I feel like I'm getting pumped. I really feel like I'm getting pumped. He just went into Origin. He just quoted Origin, quoting the Gospels. His direct argument against the Gospels. You're using the Bible to solidify your argument? I feel like I'm getting pumped right now, sa.neter. I feel like I'm really getting pumped. So let's talk about like your argument, brother, is all over the place. The debate should be about the historicity, not about your spiritual belief system, which is what you're arguing. Stevie Wonder can see this. Let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about eyewitness accounts, right? That connect. He wants to talk about what connects Christianity to Egyptian mythology, right? Let's talk about what connects Christ to historicity, right? Based on eyewitness accounts. Let's talk about it in honesty and earnesty, right? Because this is not okay. This is not real, right? So Quadratus, right? Quadratus, recalling meeting Jesus' eyewitnesses, right? This is Quadratus. He's going to be he's recorded. He recorded and recalling his meetings with those who were eyewitnesses to Jesus himself, right? So let's talk about it, right? So writing in 117 CE, right? Quadratus of Athens, who died in 129 AD, recalls witnesses of Jesus being loud and present in the Mediterranean area. And he would have been referring to the time around 80 AD. In the manuscripts of Suetonius, the name Christ appears as Christos. Let's continue. Quadratus of Athens, right, quotes this. He writes this, I should say. The works of our Savior were always present. Now, this is an extra biblical source, family. For they were true. Those who were healed, those who rose from the dead, those who were not only seen in the act of being healed or raised, but were also always present, not merely when the Savior was living on earth, but also for a considerable time after his departure, so that some of them survived even to our own times, i.e., possibly Quadratus' lifetime, presumably when he was decades younger. This is cited and recorded in history by Eusebius in his history in Ecclesiastes 4, 3, and 2, right? Let's continue. This is Quadratus writing about those who were direct eyewitnesses to Jesus. Not that they made those up. And guess what? Quadratus' writings have been known for hundreds of years, thousands of years. And guess what? No one says Quadratus' account by meeting the eyewitnesses of Jesus is false or made up. Our good brother Reginald is not going to be able to show us one source that goes against Quadratus saying in his statement when he writes he actually met Jesus, eyewitnesses to Jesus during his lifetime and after the fact. You have to completely dismiss history. This is the only way he can argue this debate. He has to completely dismiss history, which he says has to be historical. This has to be a historical debate. But he wants to dismiss history and gives us his whole zeitgeist argument. You're not having the same debate that you issued a challenge on. Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus, commonly referred to as Suetonius, wrote biographies of Roman rulers in his works concerning Claudius, who reigned 41 to 54 AD. Suetonius writes that the emperor expelled the Jews from Rome because they constantly made disturbances at the instigation of Christ, right? This is Suetonius Davis Claudius, right? Manuscript 25. In the manuscripts of Suetonius, the name Christ appears as Christos, right? Philon, born AD 80, was a secular historian. These are all extra biblical sources. Now, mind you, this brother earlier said that there are no first century sources. These are all first century sources, not second century, first century sources. In any historical debate, if you argue for historicity, at least you're in the realm of the first century in the time during which Christ lived. He lived within the first century. Now, if he lived during their lifetime, that does not make them contemporaries to the century that he lived in. Now, he wants to pigeonhole the Bible, but still using biblical narratives, because the Bible clearly gives us PhD, scholarly attested sources for Paul that actually contest that Paul was a contemporary of Yeshua. But since our brother does not want to adhere to that, he simply wants to dismiss that. He wants to use theological interpretations to argue against the Bible, to argue against the Gospels for evidence. Make sense. But Philon said this: there are two books credited to his name, the Chronicles and the Olympiads. Little is known about Philon, but he made reference to Christ. The first quote below is unique to Origen. The second quote, which he brought up, Origen, is unique to Origen. The second quote is recorded by Philon. The third quote is from Julius Africanus, and the last is from Jerome. So we have first century's accounts, but even by his own mouth, there are even those in Origen that he brought into this argument. And guess what? If you read Origen's arguments, Origen never said Jesus didn't exist. How easy would it have been for him to do so? Like, let's not play this game that he's not arguing about faith. You're arguing about faith because you don't believe. You arguing against history itself. You cannot do that in this debate. This is a historical debate. None of the neters that you're talking about, none of those things are historical figures. Those are mythologies, ideologies. Philemon comment that an eclipse of the sun occurred during Jesus' death was impossible, right? Thales also writes about this, another historian. Since the Jewish Passover occurs during a full moon, it is important to note that an eclipse of the sun cannot occur during a full moon, since the moon would be on the opposite side of the earth, and that Jesus died during the Passover during a full moon. It is important to read Thales' comments to completely understand the issue. So here Philion is writing about what is known about the death of Christ or Jesus at the time. That there was a eclipse of the sun, eclipse of the sun that shouldn't have occurred during that particular time. So there was an argument and debate about the science of the time, not just a theological argument. Philion and Thales was not having a theological argument. They were having a scientific argument over the death of Jesus and what happened during that time, that many eyewitnesses were still available and people had recorded about the eclipse that we read about in the biblical narrative during this particular time. But we won't go into the biblical passage to support it. But here's the works of Philion. And the only reason why he's even addressing this is because they understood Jesus to be a historical figure. And never once, even in his argument against the eclipse happening and against Thales, he never says Jesus was not a historical figure. How easy would it have been to do so? Right? I can go in further into his references of Jesus. We talked about that a little bit more. I'll skip over that. I really won't even go into that. Let me get to some things that he's not even familiar with, because a lot of the surface level information that he talks about. So extra biblical sources on the life of Jesus, right? We're still in the 1st century where he says there's no 1st century's accounts. We're still in the 1st century. Ignatius' letter to Trellians, a letter to the Smyrnians, right? This is an extra biblical source. Chapter 10, section 10, verse 1. But if it were a certain persons who are godless, that is unbelievers, say that he suffered only in semblance, as my brother is saying right here, being themselves more semblance, why am I in bonds? And why also do I desire to fight with wild beasts? So I die in vain. Truly then I lie against the Lord. In other words, he's saying if Jesus was false and y'all thought he was false, if y'all only thought that he was a Gnostic teaching, then why do y'all have me in prison for being a believer? This is his argument. If he was only make-believe, why am I in chains? If y'all say he was only a Gnostic understanding, as this brother is trying to say, because they never thought he was just a Gnostic understanding in the 1st century. They knew that he was a real person, and they were afraid for the spread of his message.
3 minutes.
Right? Chapter 11. Shun ye therefore those vile offshoots that gender a deadly fruit, whereof is a man, if a man taste, wherefore he dieth. For these men are not the father's planting. Right? So this is what he says. So let me go back to Quadratus, because before we get to Quadratus, we also have an individual named Papias. Right? Papias, the most significant patristic sources are the early reference of Papias and Quadratus, right? 124 CE, still in the 1st century, right? Mostly reported by Eusebius in the 4th century, which both mention eyewitnesses of Jesus' ministry and healings who were still alive in their own time in the late 1st century. Papias, right, in giving his sources for the information contained in his largely lost commentaries, stated according to Eusebius, if by chance anyone who had been in attendance on the elders should come by way, I inquired about the words of the elders, that is, what according to the elders Andrew or Peter said, or Philip, or Thomas, or James, or John, or Matthew, or any other of the Lord's disciples, and whatsoever Ariston and the elder John, the Lord's disciples, were saying. Translations by Richard Bachman, Jesus and the Eyewitnesses. So this
1 minute.
Cambridge University. This is an extra biblical source about Papias speaking with those who had spoke to the disciples, firsthand account. Although also those who had firsthand eyewitness accounts. They talk to the eyewitnesses. Just like if there's an accident or a crime scene, the police are not eyewitnesses most of the time. But what do? They come to the scene and they investigate the scene. They record and they look for the eyewitnesses. They come knocking on your door. Tell me what you saw. And they began to write and record the eyewitnesses' accounts. Those eyewitnesses' accounts, along with other information, are actually used in court. When the investigators come and testify and they call to court by the prosecutors, they say, do you have any eyewitness accounts? Yes. Where's your reporting on that? Here's our reporting on the eyewitness accounts. And the eyewitness accounts, the recording of it, of those investigators, are permissible in court.
Time. All right, man. We're getting ready to move right into the 3rd round. This is heating up. It's heating up. Let me let y'all know that there has been a change with Pastor Manning and Captain Tazariak. I just want to update y'all real quick. There will not be a debate between Captain Tazariak and Pastor Manning. We have just upgraded. We now have General Yarah coming out for the first time in a long time to take on Pastor Manning. That's why you see the question mark. I ain't had time to put the general up there right now because of this debate, but this is going to be even fiery now. We got the general, the commanding general, Captain Tazariak's general, the head man of ISUPK is going to be fire. Trust and believe. I think I might make this live and in person at the El Hamba Ballroom. It's going to be going down, y'all, in Harlem. All right. So, Reginald, your your PowerPoint is up, and time will begin when you're ready to speak, brother. Hold on, let me unmute.
Brother.
Go ahead. Now we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. All right. So it's so interesting. This brother, he wants to really change what I said about evidence. And let me remind the audience what I said. Okay. I said that there should be a Roman record of his trial and execution, but none exist. A Jewish record of his trial, but none exist. Mentions of contemporary historians, that means in his lifetime, not talking about witnesses that saw his lifetime. There's none that exist. So I did not say just the 1st century. I said during 0 to 33 CE, during Jesus's lifetime. Was that in the 1st century? Yes. But just saying 50 years after his death is enough? No. Sorry, brother, that won't get it. You're going all around the mountain talking about how I'm doing this and that. And I'm telling you that it is mythology. And you cannot seem to understand that I am saying it's mythology, and what I am showing you is where the mythology came from. You cannot grasp that. I don't get it. I know you're an intelligent brother. So, doggone. So anyway, so again, no mention of Roman governors or officials about Jesus. No historical records exist. He's going all around the mountain about people who's talking about him, and all they're saying is that it's somebody who believed that Jesus exists. They're just talking to people who believe that he exists. Still not one eyewitness account. That's what this brother is putting up. That's all he's doing. Come on, brother, give us some records. Give us one eye account. If there was 5,000 people that were at the Sermon on the Mount, there should have been people writing letters to their family, because people couldn't really write back then, so they hired scribes. So they would hire scribes to write letters to their family members. Man, if just a few of those people, just say 1,000, wrote something to somebody else, there might be something in history. Pontius Pilate existed, the guy who supposedly executed him. But there's still, he's the governor that executed Jesus, and he left no record? Come on. No record. That means he was derelict in his duties. He wasn't even a good governor if he didn't leave any records. He probably should have been fired. Jesus was a monumental, life-changing, world-changing figure at that time. Supposedly 5,000 people gathered. Dude, that would be a big crowd today. And nobody said anything about it. He walked on water. He healed the blind. And there was nobody that wrote anything of these fantastic events. Give me a break. Come on now. Let's be real. You got to jump through all these hoop logics to try to show that he exists when he don't. It's your faith that is on trial here. And you cannot prove your faith. You can't make me believe it. Show me the evidence. Show me firsthand accounts of Jesus from 0 to 33 CE. Show me those firsthand accounts. Show us here in the audience. Tell us about those firsthand accounts. You can't, because there are none. He never existed. And I'm telling you, he's mythological. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about the Bible, where it came from. That's it. What don't you understand about that? I don't get it. So it's hilarious. So anyway, so the Rosetta Stone. So once the Rosetta Stone was translated, Christian deceit was exposed. So this was in 1799. It wasn't translated until 1822. So for almost 2,000 years, nobody knew the connection, the mythological connections. Nobody knew it until they uncovered the Rosetta Stone. But for all those centuries before the translation of the Rosetta Stone, and this is the book, The Pagan Christ, is Blind Faith Killing Christianity. The ancient key to all the Egyptian material had been lost. Centuries of blissful ignorance went by. Now, since the translation of the book of Old Egypt, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Pyramid Text, and the Anduat, and the Book of Thoth, for example, there is irrefutable proof that no one single doctrine, rite, or tenet in or usage in Christianity was in reality a fresh contribution to the world. In other words, they want to tell you that Christianity is unique, and it's not. They copied stuff and then changed it. That's what I'm showing you, what they copied and what they changed. I'm not talking about faith. I'm talking about mythology, where your faith rests, where you are the one who cannot prove any historical evidence from the first, from 0 to 33 CE. During Jesus's time, during his life, there is no record. It is the absolute craziest thing to me that Pontius Pilate has been proven historical. Yet there is no record that he made of Jesus. Family, that is crazy. How can that man exist but no record of Jesus? Why didn't he do his job? Because Jesus wasn't well known? That's a bunch of crap. Rome thought he was a threat. That's why they executed him. Were there people at his execution? I mean, any movie I've seen has been Jesus dragging his cross, and you got thousands of people on both sides of him watching him drag his cross. So I'm assuming that that's what Christianity thinks that happened, that there had to be thousands of people, but no one was there. No one witnessed it. Pontius Pilate didn't record his execution, but he would record all the lesser known people that were there. It doesn't make sense. It's an illogical hoop to jump through. I got to be in the logic gymnastics, the logic Olympics, the logical obstacle course to try and accept that crap. But if you are about belief and faith, I get it. You'll accept anything to hang on to prove that that man existed historically. He didn't. That's what I'm saying. Okay. So the early learned Gnostics more worthy of the name Christian. This evident beyond contradiction, if only from the fact that the Gnostics, the more intelligent party that would have held the religion in line with high philosophical interests, were turned out as heretics. Gibbon states that the Gnostics were the most cultured, the most learned, and most worthy of the Christian name. In other words, these people that ended up taking over Christianity, they hijacked it. They messed it up. The Gnostics would have been a better representation. Come on. So next, Egypt was the Holy Land, the veil, lifting the veil of ignorance around Egyptian teachings. All right. So Egyptians were monotheistic. This is one of the things a lot of people still don't realize. Many people today think that Egyptians worship many gods, but the truth is they were monotheists. Our modern idea of worship does not fit their belief system. Worship assumes the idea of God outside of you. Ancient Kemet saw each of us as divine. The journey was about recognizing the developing that the divine spark was within ourselves. The great analogy to understand their thinking is about our relation to the I am and ourselves. As God is like an infinite ocean of consciousness, and we are individual drops within it. Each drop contains the essence of the entire ocean. Just as we carry the divine within us, through a single drop may seem small, it remains inseparable from the whole. Just as we are unique expressions of the divine, yet always connected to the greater source. Christianity somehow sees us as different from the source. Now understand again, this is about where Christianity came from and their ideas and what they changed and shifted. It was from the mythology of ancient Egypt. You're talking about faith, man. You don't understand. I don't have faith. I don't need faith in Jesus. None of us non-believers need faith in Jesus. So stay on your game and produce some doggone evidence where Jesus had eyewitnesses from 0 to 33 CE. At least prove one of those miracles, man. Somebody should have wrote a letter about it. That was some fantastic stuff. Somebody should have wrote a letter about it somewhere. But we don't have any, do we? And you can't produce any. All you're talking about is people who talked about Jesus. All that says is that somebody believed that Jesus existed just like you do. They might have talked to other people who believed that Jesus existed just like you do. That does not confirm that Jesus existed at all. All it confirms is that there were believers then. Nobody is disputing that. There were Christians that were not even believers before then. The KRST. They believed in the idea of Christ, but it had nothing to do with Jesus Christ. So we know Christians existed. That's not what we need here today. What we need is your first-hand documentation. Again, nobody else has proved that in 2,000 years, and it looks like you can't either. You're talking out the side of your neck. It's just you making all these grandiose ideas about what I'm doing and what I'm not doing. Do your job. You're failing. You are failing at your job to prove Jesus exists. You cannot give any first-hand documents. No trial records, no nothing. You're failing, brother. Help us all out. We want to know Jesus existed. I'd like to know that. But I know he didn't. He's myth. He's
3 minutes.
mythology.
3 minutes.
It. So the netters are really what are being expressed that became a part of the Bible. So only the creator can make something out of nothing. It is connecting link between the cause and effect of the mysterious, and only the ignoramus who wants to consider a netter in the human form. That's what Christianity has done. They've taken the netters of Osiris and Horus and made a composite being out of them. Horus is the light or intellect of the creator that descends from the heavens to the earth plane. That's where Jesus comes from. Horus is the same universal function of the eternal light of the creator, with a different name, where universal and more specific to earth. Yehusa was the primordial light. We've already established that Yehusa and Yeshua is the same. Horus or Heru was the same function, but at the level of matter. Osiris represents the physical vessel that contains the light. Osiris is the person in the unaware, dead, or asleep state. All of us on earth are the netter Osiris in the Egyptian context. Everybody. It's not about just one single man. Never was. He never existed. Prove him. Bring me some documentation. Not people talking about him. Not people playing the telephone game where they whisper something in bodies in one ear, and 20 years later, or 20 people later, it's something totally different, because that's what Christianity did. They're the result of the after everybody has said everything and then got it wrong. Prove Jesus. Prove an external document.
1 minute.
Prove a
1
trial
minute.
record. Prove a Jewish trial record, a Roman trial record. Mentions by contemporary historians. Contemporary, brother, do you know? Contemporary means of his time, not 30 years later, 100 years later, people talking about it. Maybe I need to help you with that definition. Contemporary means during his time. Okay? I'll help you out there. All right? Mentions by Roman governors or officials. None of this exists. Again, that's your job, and you're failing. You can't prove there was a Jesus. Nobody has in 2,000 years. Only faith-based believers, apologetics, people who have a vested interest in proving their faith, those are the people you're talking about. Those are the scholars you're talking about. The ones that are apologetics just like you.
Time. Elder Yarah. Calling on Elder Yarah. Where you at, brother? All right, going into your third round, possible the fourth round. This might go 4 rounds. It's up to you two. Elder Yarah, time will start when you're ready, brother. Unmute yourself, Elder Yarah.
Yeah, my bad. Yeah, let's get into it. The consensus of scholars.
You ain't got nothing showing yet. You ain't got nothing up.
Yeah, let me show it. My bad. Thank you. Let me show it real quick. I want to show something right here.
why you guys can't believe everything you hear. So, but let me say this. Can you see my screen, sa.neter?
Yes, your screen is up. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Time start.
Yeah, so again, let me say this. The consensus of scholars have already agreed. I've already quoted Bart Ehrman, consensus scholars, F.S. Bruce, all of these scholars have already determined that there is very little historical or written evidence for anyone in the early first century. Because many people, especially in the areas of Galilee where we know Jesus was placed and where he lived and where he died, most of the people were illiterate. They did not read or write. So why are we looking for that type of evidence there? It does not exist in whole or in part. But what we do have is people, as I quoted to you in Quadratus, who actually spoke to the eyewitnesses, not believers. Quadratus did not say these were believers I spoke to. He said these were eyewitnesses to the things and the miracles that Jesus did. These were eyewitnesses, not believers. You must deal with that fact, sir. He's not calling them believers. He said these are eyewitnesses to the lives and times of Jesus, even to the miracles that he's been attributed to in the Gospels. These are eyewitnesses that they talked to. You said yourself, sir, you were a history teacher. So was I. I taught history in high school. The issue with that is that when you say you teach history, what type of history are you teaching? How do you approach history? If you say that history does not have the methodology, then you're a very poor teacher of history. And this is what seems to be the case here. You're not using a methodology. Simply saying, no, it isn't, is not a rebuttal, and it's not even historical prowess or a fact. Simply saying, no, that didn't happen. No, it didn't exist. That's not history, sir. That's not how you determine historicity. So let me help you in understanding that. So you mentioned that it wasn't until Champollion deciphered the Rosetta Stone that now they can make the comparison between the Demotic and the Greek and the hieratic script, right? That the covers was pulled off of Christianity and you can prove the connection. Well, sir, you're absolutely ignorant about the fact of understanding the Rosetta Stone. Because here in this article here, the relationship between hieroglyphic, hieratic, and Demotic, we know that Demotic was actually on the Rosetta Stone. If you read closely in this article, sir, the Demotic script was well known until 400 CE, 300 years after, 400 years almost to be exact, after the life and death and burial of Yeshua, and the historicity of many first century witnesses and first century historians that actually said he was a real person, a corporeal body, a real person. We know that the Demotic script was actually still being used 400 years after his death, before you jump all the way to 1799 or whatever date you gave in the 1700s. So you mean to tell me that they still had the use of this language? They still had the use of this script, and no one could read any documents, that there were no circulating documents in ancient Kemet written in the Demotic as it was on the Rosetta Stone, that they could read and say Jesus was created and compiled up of all of these Egyptian mysteries? So your argument fails poorly. This is why I question any understanding of what you say as a history. You were a history to what type of history were you teaching? At the end of the day, your argument fails on that point. It is moot. Now, unless you backtrack and begin to say, you know what? Yeah, they could read the Demotic. So my mistake was, and you probably misspoke, you probably misread someone's understanding, or you just took bad information. You gleaned from bad information. And that's okay. Just say, oh, you was wrong. You were completely wrong. So when we talk about eyewitnesses of Jesus, you don't want to actually talk about the eyewitnesses of Jesus because you don't want to deal with the Gospels. I never presented anything to you about faith. I'm only speaking to you based on the historical method.
I'm only speaking to you based on actual documented eyewitness records. I haven't spoken to you about what one believer said. I haven't spoken to you about one individual who believed in Jesus. These were people who actually believed that he was a historical figure, extra biblical sources. And guess what? Not all of them were followers of Jesus. They were not followers of Jesus. They weren't. So for you to say that, oh, he's only talking about faith and his belief, I haven't mentioned my belief at all. This is not based on belief. You ask for reasonable doubt, not understanding that reasonable doubt is based on a theological argument. You're asking for things that no one will find in a historical record. You asked about trial records from Pontius Pilate. First of all, if you actually understood the history, Pontius Pilate wasn't the one who asked for the persecution of Yeshua. It was actually the Jews themselves. So why would there be a Roman record for that? And after, if you actually understood, this is why Seganius, if you actually study Seganius, who was contemporary with Pontius Pilate and Seganius was actually killed because of his attempt to overthrow Caesar. Why was that? Why is Seganius important in this conversation when it comes to Pilate? Simply because Pilate was looked upon as someone who could not control the region. And so any mention of an uprising would have been his downfall. So he had no incentive of recording any instigations. And there were many instigations during Pontius Pilate's time. So he had no incentive of recording. The Christian movement at that time, or the followers of Christ, was not a large enough movement for them to even give rise to. It's only after the death of Yeshua that Christianity began to grow and had to become recognized and dealt with 300 years later. But when you talk about the actual historical figure of Jesus, no one beyond the people that dealt with him and he dealt with and wrote about him actually cared. They did not. Even the Jews that existed during that time who was responsible for writing the Talmud called him a magician. They called him a sorcerer. They called him a liar, but they never said he didn't exist. And no one that you can point out, and in between all of this time from 0 to 33 years, ever said that he took from ancient Kemet. You have no record of him anyone going into ancient Kemet and taking out and taking from the works of ancient Egypt and creating Christianity. And when we get into the Q&A round, I'm going to ask you a question directly that's going to destroy your whole argument, sir, because you failed. You want someone to give you a reason to believe in Jesus. You really want to be a good Christian. And I understand that. You really want to be a good Christian. But we're talking about history. And history has a methodology to it. There's a historical method that you have not addressed all night. If you're talking about academic scholarship, I've given you the historical method. So here, let me deal with this real quick. How much time do I got left, sir?
You have 5 minutes. You have 6 minutes completely. Total. 5 minutes and 48 seconds now.
Yep, that's what I want. Okay, cool. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. We can see your screen.
Can you see my screen, sir?
Yes, sir. You got 5 minutes and 30 seconds.
Great. Okay, great. I want to deal with here. Is this the right one here? want to deal with Dallas really quickly.
You got 5 minutes.
Right. Yep, I'm getting to it. Let me get into it. Hold on 1 second.
Time is moving.
Yeah. I don't want to do that. Okay, yep, this is what I want to deal with. Justin Martyr, right? The reliability of the eyewitness accounts of Jesus. First, Jesus died around the year 30, so the gospel was written after that. The first really convincing quotations of the gospels, there are probable allusions earlier than this, but these are the most certain ones come in the writings of Justin Martyr around 150, right? Justin does not name the gospels as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but he does call certain books, right? These are extra biblical sources, right? The memoirs of the apostles. He quotes them explicitly, and his quotations line up with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It is debated whether he quotes John, but there are two quotations that certainly make it appear that he knows John. This is an eyewitness account from Justin Martyr knowing who the apostle John is. This is an eyewitness account. John, who was connected to Jesus. Now, if he wants to say that you can't count this as an eyewitness account, then he doesn't know what an eyewitness account is. He doesn't know what he's asking for, but he's asking for extra biblical sources. This means, for starters, that the gospel must have been written sometime between 30 and 150 CE. So again, we have plenty eyewitness accounts who've dealt with people who've recorded these eyewitness accounts, right? His only argument is that how come somebody didn't write Jesus a letter when he was feeding the 5,000? How come they ain't sent a letter home? Well, what email was they going to use? What emails are they going to use? Most of these people travel with their family. What would they need to write them a letter for? They weren't writing and sending letters all over Rome. They weren't sending letters to North America and into ancient. They wasn't doing that. That's a crazy argument, man. If that's what you need in order to believe Jesus, you need to just call it in, throw in your cards, cash in your chips, and just say you just want to be the best Christian you could be, because you're looking for reasons to be that, right? Let's talk about. So when he talks about these world mythologies, Asar and Aset and all these different things, E.J. Michael Wetzel, right, focusing on the oldest available texts, right, buttressed by data from archaeology, comparative linguistics, and human population genetics, the book reconstructs a simple, original African source for our collective myths, dating back to some 100,000 years, beyond the 10,000 years you're referring to, identifying features shared by this out of Africa mythology and its northern Eurasian offshoots. The book suggests that these common myths recounted by the communities of the African Eve are the earliest evidence of ancient spirituality, not ancient Kemet. You're not dating ancient Kemet back to 100,000 years. We're talking about beyond your ancient Kemet civilization that you're claiming that these ideas come from. They do not. They're much older than what you suggest, right? But let's watch this.
1 minute. 1 minute.
Let's see if these things actually connect to Jesus, right? Number one, the whole understanding of Jesus being unique is not based on any similarities you think you might read between ancient Kemet or ancient Greek or any Assyrian text or any Sumerian mythology. It's not based on that. The uniqueness of the story of Jesus is that he who was believed to be a saint, to be a historical person, came and gave his life for a people. No other Egyptian texts will tell you that. No other ideology, not even in the false mythologies of the netters. None of those netters would say that either the principle in the principles of Mayat or Asar or Heru, any of that could connect themselves and say that this individual or that these ideas was to give their life for their fellow man. Show me that in any pyramid text, ulterior text. Show me that. That's the uniqueness of Yeshua's story, not this foolishness you're talking about.
All right. Time. There we go. There we go. We right back up to Reginald. This is your last and final round. Going into the fourth round. This debate was so hot. We had to give these brothers 4 rounds to get this information out to the people. And now I'm thinking about giving y'all a 10-minute rebuttal without using slides, just speaking from the hip, shooting from the lip. All right. And so right now, Brother Reginald, time will begin when you start. This is your last and final 4th round.
Well, man, there's just so many things that he just his brother making up arguments, and he's wanting to like try to tell me what I'm saying and what I'm thinking. Brother, don't do that. I know what I'm thinking. You know, I know what I want to say. So, but the deal is, again, you're trying to give me all these reasons and excuses why there are no first century or no documentation of Jesus Christ. You're talking about John. John who? The disciples weren't historical either. so they weren't eyewitnesses. John the Baptist? Man, no. That doesn't work. It doesn't fly. All of them are in the ancient Egyptian mythology. So stop all of that. We still need some first 0 to 33 documentation of Jesus. That's what we were asking for. That's what I'm asking for. So quit giving me the excuses and produce the documentation. Produce the records that should be there. You're saying that Jesus was. If you talk to any Christian, there's no way that they'll tell you that Jesus was like unheard of, that he was just unknown. There's no Christian that would tell you that. This dude was doing stuff that was freaking monumental. That's why Rome executed him. He was making up a whole lot of noise. People were following him. That's why they executed him. But you want to tell me that no, he wasn't that well known, so that's why ain't no records. Dude, it's a contradiction. You're talking out of both sides of your mouth. Either he fed 5,000 people, that's rock star legend. That's rock star level back then. That's 5,000 people came to see him to supposedly. Somebody should have said something. He was well known for that area. That small of an area is what you're telling me. So cut that out, man. You have no records. He did not exist. Plain and simple. You can't prove it. All you're giving me is excuses. Stop it. So biblical miracles. So Jesus died, somebody that gave themselves up for humanity. That is the exact story of Osiris, man. You don't know your mythology. You've been so banging around in all this apologetic stuff, and you listening to them, you don't know what these stories are saying. You have no idea, because that's exactly what Osiris did. He gave himself up so that we may live, humanity. That's what every soul did. That was the sacrifice. Man. So mythology was not about literal beings, okay? The mythology was never about literal beings. It was about the universal functions. That's what we're talking about. That's the stories that are going to link Osiris and Horus and Jesus, is the functionality, not the actual story. And that's what I can't get my brother to understand. The mythology is about universal functions of nature. That's what they're explaining and expressing. It's all about us, not one special being. Okay? So you got to know the difference between anthropomorphizing and humanizing. Anthropomorphizing is using representations of using natural representations to basically help you understand universal functions or abstract ideas. That's what these netters are. That's what Osiris and Horus is. They're an abstract concept, a metaphysical concept that is being personified. And then Christianity took it further and made Jesus historical. He never existed. You have no records. You got people talking about him, but you have no direct proof of Jesus. Nobody has, because he didn't exist. He came from ancient Egypt mythology. You said there's nobody that says that Jesus studied in Egypt or anything like that. Of course not, because he never existed. So, no. Man, you're making up, you're just like throwing all this stuff against the wall to see what sticks. None of it does. The only thing that's going to stick is a Jewish record, a Roman record, something about his crucifixion. Prove one of the miracles, just one. That's all you got to do. You're doing a bad job. Man, so this whole thing is about the journey of the Son. So when he gave himself up, it was about the idea of the soul that gave themselves up to merge into physical reality. It's a metaphysical, the concepts are about metaphysics, not literal happenings, not literal history. That's what I can't get you to understand about this stuff. You're so stuck in the literal, you cannot understand metaphysics. It goes beyond that. These are not literal things. The idea, how would you represent awareness? Okay? The Eye of Horus, everybody knows the Eye of Horus. This is connected to Jesus. The idea of the eye being aware, of being able to see, of light. The ancient symbols used are not literal descriptions to be expressed. They're profound metaphysical truths. The Eye of Horus is one of the most powerful representations of conscious awareness. Horus as divine light represents illumination. What did Jesus do? Didn't Jesus say, someone else the light of the world?
Time out. Your time stopped at 8:50. Elder Yarah, you got to turn on the camera. You got to turn on the camera. You got to make sure you're there while he's speaking. All right, brother. There you go. All right. Go ahead, brother. Time resume.
Okay. All right. So Horus as a divine light represents illumination, bringing clarity to what was once hidden in the darkness. The light equals knowledge, equals divine awareness, the ability to perceive beyond physical light. This is the functions that the biblical character of Jesus represents. The same thing is in Horus. That's how they're connected, by the functions. That's what mythology is explaining. It's a spiritual science, not literal history. Never was. So the idea that the myth, this is to understand, the myth is not the message. The teaching of myth is necessarily functional. This is what R.A. Schwaller delivered is saying in The Sacred Science. It relates facts. Facts as concrete objects perceptible through the senses and through human intelligence serve as a basis, but it is not the things we are describing. They serve as a fulcrum, as an evocation of functions and universal character. So let's talk about Jesus giving himself up, okay? Because here, this is the idea of that Jesus gave himself up. So in ancient teachings, when the soul incarnates, it enters its feminine phase. This was never about a literal virgin birth, but it was about the soul entering the material world. Matter equals mother equals womb. The physical body is the womb where the soul is nurtured and grows. Incarnation is a passive receptive phase. Hence, it is feminine in nature. This is why the soul's descent into the body was symbolized as a virgin birth, because the divine intellect is entering the world of matter, untouched by prior experience. But what happens next? This is where the mythology makes a distinction. If the soul awakens to its divine nature, the body becomes the womb that births a higher consciousness. But if the soul never recognizes this divine aspect, the body becomes a tomb, the final resting place of an unawakened spirit. This is the real meaning behind the second death. Not a place of punishment, but the failure to awaken. This concept exists in Platonic theosophy, Egyptian mysticism, and countless ancient traditions. It's not unique to Christianity. You think him giving himself up is unique, you're wrong again. It's a common thing. Christianity stripped it of its meaning, turning it into a literal story of a miraculous birth. But the myth is still relevant today because all of us are either in our womb phase or we're in our tomb phase. We're either growing and learning and developing as souls having a human experience, or we're ignorant of our divine self. We're ignorant of the divinity that's within us. In that case, we become the tomb. So don't tell me Jesus' story. You gave something that is unique that ain't, brother. You tripped yourself up. I can show you whether I just showed you where it came from. It is the soul descending into matter. Let's go. I'm just moving ahead here. So this is where the crucifixion is talking about. This is what we're talking about here. The sun is the natural cycles of the season. It's a metaphor for the journey of the soul. In ancient times, the crucifixion was at the autumn equinox. 40 days later was October 31st, was Halloween. That 40 days was a gestation period. Then Christmas was just basically the sun was getting stronger, and then Easter was the actual resurrection. But this is what Christianity did. They changed something that was natural because the ancients looked at us as an extension of the universe. But Christianity changed the crucifixion to something in the physical. And then 3 days later was the resurrection. That's unnatural. This is the way it's supposed to be. The sun descended into the physical. The Son gave himself up so that we may live. That's where this whole idea came from. It ain't new. I'll say again, it ain't new. It's not unique to Christianity. This was taught 10,000 years in ancient Egypt. 10,000 years before Christianity. It's not unique, brother. It is not unique. They're telling the same story as they told in ancient Egypt. Stop it. The crucifixion. Okay, let me get one. Let me get to mythology of Osiris. Okay, so a secret, which the Egyptian connection to raising Lazarus. A secret which jolted the jar of Christianity into recognition of its true origin is the majestic ancient wisdom of Egypt. The irrefutable etymological fact that the name Lazarus in John's Gospel is but a Judeo-Latinized expansion of the original Egyptian name Osiris, which was Asar. As the Egyptians generally referred to him as Lord Osiris, the Hebrews prefixed their short El form of God, making El Asar. And the Romans completed the transformation by suffixing the US termination of most Roman masculine names, making El Asar us. The initial E wore off. And as the scholars say, the S shifted to its brother Z. And we have the name Lazarus. Horus, the son of God, raised his dead father at a town called Anu, tracking back to the Bethany of ancient Egypt. Jesus, the Son of God, raised Lazarus from the dead at Bethany. This Anu likewise suffered a sea change at Hebrew hands and was prefixed with their word for house, which is Beth, making it Beth Anu. As the U of the ancient Greek words transforms into Y in English, the outcome in Hebrew, hands was Bethany. So the miracle of Jesus raising Lazarus is definitely the rescript of Horus raising Osiris. And this presumably removes the incident from the domain of history over into the spiritual allegory. Bam! Jesus was not unique. His story was not unique, brother. You got to learn about mythology, man. You got to learn about where these ideas came from. And what you'll find is instead of having to worship something, you can recognize your own divinity. Because that's what these stories were about us. They were about empowering us, not disempowering us. So what you think is unique ain't. Plain and simple. I'm done, y'all. I'm done, sa.neter.
Okay, all right. Elder Yarah, it's on you, brother. This is your last and final round. Let's go, my brother.
Let me share something real quick. That's why all these guys are the same comedians, right? We're talking about Lazarus is the rising of a czar. First of all, I'll just show it to the people because I don't want the people to say.
Let me know when you're ready.
Can you see my screen, sa.neter?
Okay, your screen is up. Hold on.
Yeah.
It's taking time to come through.
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. All right, here we go.
Okay. Yeah, first of all, the brother talked about Lazarus. Yeah, they have to stop this ridiculousness, right? I'll get into it a little bit later. But when you look up the word Lazarus, right, we already know that it's of Hebrew origin, right? The name, right, is whom God helps. And it's a form of the Hebrew name Eleazar. Nothing to do with Asar. You're just reading the Greek translation of a Hebrew name. Like, that's ridiculous. Right? But I have to learn mythology. No, you have to be deprogrammed from the mythology because it has you off, as it has this whole entire debate. Now, let me share this as well, right? Let me give it some time to come up. Make it a little bit bigger, right? Y'all got to stop that. That's ridiculous. All right, let me read this here, right? D.M. Murdoch, right? She's the Mark Furman of astrotheology. And this is what this brother is bringing, right? And I'm going to prove this to you when we get to this question and answer round, right? So I've actually had this debate before. And I said, listen, if it doesn't fit, you must have quit. Y'all remember that from the O.J. Simpson trial, right? What this brother is doing is giving us what we call a shoehorn fallacy, right? Simply because he thinks he sees similarities in a particular story or a narrative that somehow one is being taken from the other. But I'm going to show you just the opposite here, right? So Dorothy Malign Murdoch, or Dorothy Murdoch, right? Ironically died December 25th, 2015. She was better known by her pen names Acharya S. and D.M. Murdoch. Now, if y'all don't know who D.M. Murdoch is, she is the author. She is one of the people who pushed the idea of this zeitgeist argument that Christ was somehow taken from Asar and Haru, right? No one before you get to her, except for one gentleman, and I'll show him to you a little bit later, before you get to them, never even understood this to be the case, right? If he says Jesus was so popular as he contended to hold this debate, that he was so world-renowned, how come no one ever said before this time that Jesus was taken from these spiritual systems? Were these spiritual systems lost? Were they lost? No. People who follow ancient Kemet. We have sources to prove that. People who follow these natures and these ideologies and kept Mayat and all of this foolishness, they didn't lose that.
They didn't just find a revival of that when the Rosetta Stone in the 1700s was deciphered. That's fallacious. But how come there is no Egyptian person, no one from ancient Kemet? How come Manetho never says, the Egyptian priest, how come Manetho never says, or Manetho never says that Christ or they were compositing these things? Josephus never said that. He quotes Manetho plenty of times. But Josephus never says Manetho's talked about these spiritual systems from ancient Kemet, and then Josephus says, and I see these same systems in the story of Jesus. No one's ever making that claim. No one was stupid enough to do that. They took history seriously, unlike this brother here. They didn't just make up things and say, oh, these things are connected. You can't prove that, right? He's simply making assumptions. Now watch this. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Make this a little bit bigger. All right. D.M. Murdoch was an American writer supporting the Christ myth theory that Jesus never existed as a historical person, but was rather a mingling of various pre-Christian myths, sun deities, and dying and rising deities, just like our brother been doing all night. His information is antiquated. She wrote and operated a website focused on history, religion, and spirituality, and astrotheology, which is what this brother been talking about all night. She asserted the pre-Christian religious civilizations understood their myths as allegorical, just like his brother been saying all night. But Christians obliterated evidence by destroying, suppressing literature after they obtained and control of the Roman Empire, just like this brother been asserting all night, leading to the widespread illiteracy in the ancient world, ensuring the mythical nature of Christ's story was hidden. She argued the Christian canon, as well as important figures, were based on Roman, Greek, Egyptian, and other cultural myths, right? As for her claims concerning Christianity, they were largely borrowed from the work of less than scholarly 19th century figures such as Gerald Massey and Carsey Graves, and were likely influenced by similar ideas being promoted by Jordan Maxwell, then a leading figure in the same circles. Any attempt at academic rigor she may have learned in her earlier studies went out the window, as she would accept any crackpot idea that supported her current passion. When any of these pointed out, Murdoch supporters get rather indignant, like this brother right here. He's clearly a Murdoch supporter, right? They are easily offended that someone would label her a conspiracy theorist, which she was. However, even a cursory look at her early website illustrates support for wild claims that were popular among conspiracy theories in the late 1990s. For example, in an essay she wrote entitled "Is AIDS Killing Your Mind?" she promoted the belief that AIDS was not caused by the HIV virus, but rather by part of a great conspiracy to overthrow the sexual revolution. These are the type of crackpots these ideas come through, right? Watch this. It is also escaped this dissonant that AIDS epidemic followed on the heels of the sexual revolution. It has been widely known for centuries that sexually liberated individuals are difficult to control. Blah, blah, blah. So this is the crackpot understanding that comes out of the mind of these people, right? So let's talk about. It's not, and as a matter of fact, D.M. Murdoch, let's go back to her. She's the one who gave us the whole Zeitgeist movie. It comes from her book. Jesus born on December 25th and all that. He never was. Watch this. It's not solar, it's salvation. It's completely different, right? It's not solar worship, right? When you go into the Bible, they don't support solar worship. Clear as the day. The city has no need for the sun, neither of the moon to shine, or for the very glory of God illuminated. Its lamp is the Lamb. The nations, Greek ethnos or ethnics, will walk in its light. They don't support the worship of the sun. Ideologically, mythically, or naturally, right? Let's look at it, right? Let's talk about it, because he wants to talk about sun worship, right? The prevalence of sun worship in the East led to the avoidance of so natural and significant a metaphor, right? Even there, the oldest versions either had a different reading or shrank from a literal rendering. The Septuagint or the Theodotion have, for the Lord God have mercy and truth. These are not things of belief. These are things that they did not practice. They did not practice worshiping the sun. Jesus never did. Any of his followers never did. You won't see that in the Bible, that they were adherents to following the sun. In the book of Deuteronomy, in the Torah, it tells us, do not as the Egyptians do. And we know Jesus, if all the person, whether he was historical or mythical, never has been said to not follow the law or keep the law of Moses. It was against that law to do so. Right? These arguments that he's bringing up completely fail, right? Let's talk about some of these other things, right? Watch this. We know that they didn't worship Baal. It says, who burn incense to, 2 Kings 23:5, who burn incense to Baal, the sun and the moon and the constellations, all the hosts of heaven. Why? It says they will dispose the idolatrous priests. That was against their understanding theology. So all of these things that he's making up, right, shows he has no connection of anyone following Christ or being a follower of Christ, taking anything, right, from Egyptian belief system. He can't show that, right? He can't show that. I'm not going to even have to talk about Josephus. But these are also extra biblical sources, right? Tacitus. We're not going to talk about these people, right? Because these are the things that simply he's already decided. Even in the Talmud, that talks against them. That talks against Christ during his time, even in the 1st century, right? Almost up to 30 years after his demise. They clearly state that he was a magician. But guess what? They never said he didn't exist. If there was anyone who had the opportunity and the power and the literacy to speak against Yeshua, it would have been the Jewish Sanhedrin of course at the time. But as many things as they called him, and as many times as they damned him to a physical place of damnation, you know what? They never said that the Christians made him up. You got to be disingenuous with that. You got to be disingenuous with that. What you can't do is not say that he did not exist beyond a reasonable doubt. Because the reasonable doubt is is based on what? Probability and plausibility. Is it plausible that Jesus was a historical figure? Yes. Is it a probability? The consensus of scholars agree that it was a probability. He does not want to have a historical debate based on the historical mythology. He doesn't want to deal in academia. He didn't want to deal with actual scholarship. He just wanted to tell you what he thought. He wants to tell you what he believes. This is the most disingenuous debate I've ever had. The most disingenuous debate I've ever been involved in. HOK, anywhere. Because even one of the greatest, most popular mythicists of today, Richard Carrier, doesn't even say Jesus did not exist for a 100% certainty. That's crazy. Even using the Bayesian theory that that Richard Carrier uses, he actually used a formula. And the formula, the probability, only it gives him a 30% probability. And guess what? With that 30% probability, that means there's a 30% chance that he did actually exist as a historical figure, according to Richard Carrier. Where is your methodology, sir, that says he does not exist? I've given you the methodology that says he existed. I've given you the methodology that says he does exist, or he did exist as a corporeal person. But you come in with shoehorn fallacies that you can't show and prove that anyone in during Jesus' time from 0 to 30 or 0 to 33 or 0 to 100 or 0 to 200 or 0 to 400 CE claims that he was a composite of any ancient Kemetic spiritual system. You've given us everything created by man. You've given us nothing historical.
1 minute.
You've given us no pyramid text, no ulterior text, no coffin text. You've given us nothing. You've given us no record that says Christians stole from ancient people of Kemet. You've given us nothing. But yet you have the audacity to come stand before me and simply say, well, show me without a reasonable doubt that Jesus was a real person. I've shown you without a reasonable doubt. Because reasonable doubt, you must include plausibility and probability. You cannot have reasonable doubt if it doesn't stand on those two pillars. I've given you eyewitness accounts. Those who recorded directly spoke with the eyewitnesses. What part of that you didn't understand? So you mean to tell me if one of your loved ones was killed and the people standing around them, because you didn't see it, that their eyewitness testimony doesn't mean anything?
Time.
You won't even believe your own self. You'll be knocking that door down.
All right, brothers. You got 5 minutes in your rebuttal before we give y'all the Q&A session. Brother Reginald, you are first up. Your time will start when you start. 5 minutes in your rebuttal. Overall rebuttal. No using no slides. Yeah, y'all can use slides if you want, but you only got 5 minutes in rebuttal.
Do I just stop sharing my screen?
Yeah, your screen is not sharing. It's good right there.
Okay, I can just stop sharing. So I'm good.
But if y'all want to use y'all screen for your 5 minutes, you can if you want to.
No, I'm good. I'm good. Let me end this. Okay. And I got to bring you up, sa.neter, then I'm good. Okay. All right. So first of all, the brother was saying that Yarah, I think he said it, their name was, and I am familiar with her. But I can guarantee you, brother, the people that I have followed has nothing to do with her. Okay. So I stand on the shoulders of Phil Valentine, Dr. Ray Hagins, Delbert Blair. Those are the brothers that inspired me. So Yarah, she can't hold a candle to what those brothers do. So yeah, so that's neither here nor there. But and then the idea that Manetho said nothing about Jesus. How is somebody 3,000 years before Jesus going to say something about Jesus? Somebody that never existed. How is he going to say something about him? That is illogical. I don't understand that argument. Just because somebody didn't say something about him doesn't mean that he didn't exist. I think that's exactly why he doesn't exist. If you don't say anything, nobody mentions him in his time. That's exactly why he didn't exist, because he wasn't there. That's why they didn't talk about him. They don't have to deny him. They just knew he didn't. There was no Jesus to talk about, so he was not mentioned. It's that simple. But the deal is, you still gave no contemporary records, brother. You talked about people talking about Jesus. That's a different thing. You gave no contemporary. There is still no contemporary records of his trial, of his death, of none of that. He's a myth. Stop all of that. You gave no evidence. I showed you where the myth came from. And you talking about there's no relation? Brother, you blind. Stevie Wonder can see the relation. There's no way you can deny that. That was just the tip of the iceberg. I can go deep. I can go 5 hours and show you all kind of relations. Really. Have done it. I got a whole book that I wrote. So the cracking the Christ code. I go through it all, detail for detail. I can back it up. But you can't back up Jesus. You can't back up a historical Jesus. All it is hearsay. If it was in a court of law, all you would have is hearsay. It would not be beyond a reasonable doubt. That's what you're dealing with. Hearsay in your faith. That's all you got. I'm done.
All right. You still have 2 minutes left.
I'm good.
All right, Elder Yarah, it's on you, my brother. You got 5 minutes in your rebuttal.
All right, give me a second. Give me a second. Let me do something real quick. Okay, there you go. Let me say, I'm ready, sir.
All right. Time start.
All right, so can you put me on the big screen? All right, appreciate it. I appreciate the family. Again, let me clear something up. I did not say Manetho made reference to Jesus. I said Josephus made reference to Manetho. Manetho, in all of his writings, never talked about any spiritual systems that Josephus would have ever quoted to say that Jesus, Josephus himself, would have claimed that they got from Manetho, or that Christ, who Josephus knew of, that these spiritual systems and things would have come from someone even like Manetho. Right? That's what I said. I never said Manetho made any reference to Jesus. I said Josephus made no reference to anything Manetho never said. He quoted an Egyptian priest. These things weren't composite. Again, he's not going to show us any written document. He's not going to name a Greek. He's not going to name a Roman. He's not going to name a Jewish person. He's not going to name a Christian person that he says and can prove went into ancient Kemet, had access to their records, and came back and wrote the Gospels. He also says that there's no contemporary recordation of Pilate putting Christ on trial. Why are you even making that claim? Because the Gospels actually do make that claim. This is why he wanted to keep it out of the debate. This is why he wanted to do that. See, he can't be honest with himself. So he has to take away everything that he thinks disagrees with his argument so he can actually have an argument. Because he knows that the Gospels, at least on 2 accounts, all historians agree with. That number 1, Jesus was an historical figure that was baptized, and number 2, Jesus was an historical figure that was crucified. But no historian will say that the movement that Jesus started during his lifetime was a worldwide movement. He made that up. He made that up. No historian makes that claim. It's not until after his death it becomes a worldwide movement. You don't know history, but yet you arguing against it. So again,
when we talk about a court of law, and I'm glad he keeps saying this, reasonable doubt does not mean providing evidence that is 100% absolute. Go look up the definition of reasonable doubt in Black Law's dictionary, sir. If reasonable doubt stands on two pillars, if there is a plausibility or a possibility or probability that he existed based on the records, the evidence that has been shown, that I have shown today, based on the eyewitnesses that claims to have existed, not believers. Quadratus didn't say they were believers. He said they were actual eyewitnesses. You can't dismiss them because you feel like it. You have to deal with the historical text if you want to debate against historicity. Then all you want to do is say, "Oh, I'm with them, Murdoch, but I stand on the shoulders of Phil Valentine." They didn't write before she did. Their information mirrors hers. You agree with her. She's a quack. This whole zeitgeist theory and movement came from her. So you're dealing with people who are giving you assumptions. Again, you have no argument here to stand on. You want to argue that Jesus is not historical, but you want to argue that he was made of a composite of Kemetic ideas and ideologies with no evidence to prove it. No evidence to prove it. Things that are similar does not make them the same. That's the problem that you have in this argument and why you lost this debate on tonight.
All right. We are at the point. We're at the point where y'all can now engage and ask each other questions. Reginald, Brother Martin, you are first in your question to Elder Yarah, and you have 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer the question, Yarah, uninterrupted. You have to let the brother answer the question, whether you agree with it or not. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer. Vice versa. Same for you, Brother Reginald. All right.
All right. All right. So who's asking the question first?
You asking your question first.
I mean, okay. So, Brother Yarah, are you saying that everything that I showed you about how the mythology came about, there is no correlation at all to Jesus?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Okay, see, that's good.
That's where faith is. Okay, go ahead, brother.
Hey, let me drop something on y'all real quick. Remember, I told y'all you have 1 minute and 30 seconds. Now, if you feel that you answered the question quick, you can also use your time to say things that you forgot you wanted to say in your presentation. So it's your time. You know what I'm saying? Long as you answer the question, you know. So, Brother Elder Yarah, it's on you.
Sure, absolutely. Brother Reginald, in one of your statements, you talked about Christ being taken from Asar and Haru. Do you have any written documentation or evidence that any Christian or Jewish person or Greek person actually extrapolated that information from a ulterior text, coffin text, or pyramid text of ancient Kemet?
I just showed you how the mythology works, brother. That is the documentation. So you're talking about trying to find something in a book. I took you beyond that, and I showed you how the symbolism and the mythology works. So you trying to put it in some kind of book and saying that somebody wrote it down here or something? No, that's not how it works. So I showed you how the mythology works, what they were explaining and expressing, and how it connects to Jesus. It's by function. So you never heard this before because you ain't never heard anybody put it together like I do. I have not copied Ashura S or whoever she is. This is something original. I'll stand on it. And it's going to be proven correct. I don't have to copy people.
Can I say something, sa.neter?
You got to wait till he finish. You got to wait till he finish.
Is he done? I thought he was
I'm done.
All right, Elder Yarah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I asked him, does he have a document that actually says what he's saying from any Jewish, Christian, Greek source that says that the story of Jesus was copied from any Egyptian ulterior text, coffin text, or pyramid text? That could be a simple yes or no.
No, it's not a simple yes or no, because you're asking me. It's really an irrelevant and it's a crazy question. Why would anybody be talking about Jesus is from the pyramid text? Those texts are 5,000 years old, brother. Why would it was before Jesus existed? But the idea that I explained is how the mythology works. So you're asking a question that's just it's nonsensical.
Are you done? What I'm asking, brother, is there?
Brother, I heard your question.
No, but you're not answering. I get you what you're saying. I'm gonna ask it. I asked you because I didn't say, did anybody write about Jesus 5,000 years ago? I asked you, is there any documentation that says a Greek, a Christian, or a Jew, or anyone contemporary or after Christ's time, is there anyone recorded is going back into Egyptian records, extrapolating that information, and then creating a composite Jesus? Who is the origin of this Jesus story? Who is that person's name? What is the name of that group? Can you show us who those people are? Because if you can't, you're making it up. It's your assumption. Can you show us that?
Are you finished?
I'm finished now.
Your question is nonsense. It's complete nonsense. How are people going to talk about who started this? It was a whole system that was over 10,000 years old. It's where everything in the Bible came from, brother. That's what I'm showing you.
So you can't prove it. You can't show it.
I just did.
All right. Whether you agree with his answer or not, he answered his question. And now it's your way, brother Martin, to ask Elder Yarah a question. And Yarah have a right to answer in the way he feels.
No, honestly, I don't have any more questions, man, because it's going to be a waste of time.
Okay.
So I'll ask my question, right?
All right, go ahead. Ask your question, brother.
Okay. So in the eyewitness accounts that I talked about that are being recorded in history by Quadras and Papias, can you tell me what evidence you have that suggests that Quadras or Papias did not actually speak to those eyewitnesses of Jesus himself?
Is that your question?
Yes, it is. It was a question.
First of all, it wasn't an eyewitness account. And second of all, why would I even be searching for that? Why would I be searching for somebody to say that was not an eyewitness account, brother? Come on now. Your questions are nonsense.
Can I follow up, sa.neter, since he's saying why would you
follow up?
Okay.
Go ahead and follow up.
Okay, so if you're saying why would you be searching for that? Because as a historian, if you're seeking out truth, you should be looking for those who are actually claimed to be eyewitnesses that you said didn't exist. But we have two historians from extra biblical sources that say they spoke with eyewitnesses to Jesus. Why would you dismiss their accounts?
Because it was not during his time. I gave you the criteria. During his time, contemporary, eyewitnesses of a miracle, a trial record from Rome or Jewish. That was the criteria, brother. Not somebody saying they spoke to somebody who spoke to somebody. That's what you're telling me. I'm not a historian. I'm an entrepreneur.
You said you were a history teacher.
Say what?
You said you were a history teacher.
Yeah, I said I'm a history teacher. That doesn't make me a historian.
Okay.
I'm an entrepreneur.
I agree. You're not a
Hey,
historian.
family, the link is in the chat. If y'all want to come up and ask questions, you got to cam up and ask your question.
Okay.
All
so
right. Apostle is
I got one more question, son, and then I'll be done.
Apostle is Speedy.
Can I ask one more question?
Be ready. Go ahead.
All right. So, historically speaking, in the I showed there's a historical method in determining whether or not Jesus was actual corporeal historical figure. I showed that historical method. Now, why do you disagree with the consensus of scholars, both non-theologians as well as theologians who are biblical scholars, who say Christ or Jesus existed as a historical figure? What historical evidence do you have to go against what they said?
Don't need historical evidence, because just because somebody says that they believe that Jesus exists does not mean that he did. Consensus is not proof, brother. It's as simple as that. You're going to people who are apologetics. Those are your scholars. They're looking just like you to prove your faith. So just because they said that they believe Jesus existed, that's consensus is not proof. Simple as that.
Well, actually,
all right. We're gonna move along. We're gonna move right along. The link is in the chat for those of y'all who want to come in and ask your question. Cameras must be on. You are not coming in to teach. I repeat, you are not coming in to give a lesson. You are coming in only to ask a question. All right, Brother Apostle Zaquan, you are up first on your question, brother. And who is your question pertaining to? Who? Your mic is not working. No, you might have to go come back in.
My mic is not working.
Okay, I hear you come close like that.
Yeah, come on, man. I'm trying to.
No, it's really not working.
Yeah, turn the volume up.
I was trying to keep the volume down because I didn't want to echo.
I'm gonna tell you. You don't know how to work your thing yet. I know what's the problem, but I don't want to go through teaching right now.
Well, I thought it was the level of the sound. You know, right up where it says like level minus plus.
Yes.
I got the level at 20. Should I turn it down?
No, I got my level past 20. I got my level on 62.
On what?
I got my level on 62. So it's not that.
Right.
You got something else going on.
I got to get into my transfer. I got to get into the pads because I got one of these pads.
All right, just bring your level back up, and then when you stop speaking, put it on mute. That's what you got to do.
Okay, fine.
Turn your level back up. Yeah, we can hear you. All right, go ahead.
All right, here's my question. You was referencing the word Lazarus. And from that word Lazarus, you did a breakdown of the letters L-A. You said something about
1 minute, Apostle. Do you have your YouTube channel on or no?
No, I turned it off.
It's off. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I got this echo reverb thing on it. I got to turn it off. I don't know what happened. I got to turn it off some way. But let me get through this real quick, Si.
Go ahead, bro.
Are you familiar that opposed to modern Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, which Abaya is the real Hebrew, there is no E letters. So when you start talking about L, Elion or Elinor and all of these kind of L words, they are a fallacy from the start because there's no E letter in Hebrew. The letter is an A letter. So instead of L, it's R. So when you went to Lazarus and used Lazarus,
All right, you got to ask your question, Apostle.
I am. I'm just want to know, are you familiar with that? And
No.
what you did was a logical fallacy that you were addressing in that story as you related it to Lazarus.
All right, what's your question, brother?
Do you know Lazarus was not the first person ever resurrected in the Bible? That there was a resurrection before Lazarus?
All right, that's his question.
No, I've never heard that. So, or that can come right off the top of my head. I haven't read the Bible in years.
You'll read in the book of Kings and you'll see that the prophet Elijah rose the son of a widow from death before Lazarus.
Apostle, do you know what the topic of this debate is?
Yeah.
What is
He
it?
has to prove the existence of Christ outside of the Bible.
I think that's
So what he did was take the primary.
All right, hold on, Apostle. We don't need you to teach right now.
Oh, no, I'm not teaching. I'm answering your question.
No, I got it. I got it clear. You said yes. You do know the topic.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let me move right along. We got Elder Yarah. You wanna elaborate on that as well before I move on?
Sure. This is why I said before why an apostle, Zaquan, peace to you, apostle. This is why the brother vehemently did not want the Bible brought into this debate, because it is not a matter of faith that we're arguing about the Bible. He even of himself says the Bible has history in it. No one ever makes the claim that the Bible is a history book. It's not. It's a book dealing with a particular people and their traditions and their understanding and their history, right? And so this is why he doesn't want the Bible to bring into the debate, because it goes against every argument that he can postulate. And again, he built his argument all night on fallacies, begging the question. That's all he did all night. And so when he says, you can't see the similarities between Horus and Heru and Jesus of Christ, I can see the similarities between an apple and an orange, but it doesn't make them the same, or even understanding that they came from the same tree. It's a fallacy. It's a fallacious argument. It's a poor argument. It's a poor argument to suggest, as you pointed out, that and I actually showed when he says, see, Lazarus is just a Sar. This is just a different rent. No, it's not. It's a Hebrew name that translates back to Eleazar. And as Apostle said, we know he wasn't the first person recorded as being resurrected in the biblical narrative. So his whole premise falls apart. And so all I see is people who try to do these things. They run and they make poor arguments because they really want to be good Christians.
Is this a filibuster or what?
All right. Brother Reggie. Hold on, Yarah. Hold on, Yarah. Reggie, you can respond if you like, or we can move on to the next question.
No, I wanted to hear from the other brother. So they're coming to ask.
All right. Let's go.
This brother keeps on like, dude, he wants to keep playing this game of like making up stuff. I mean, that's all he's doing. So he's saying he don't see the similarities because he can't. He doesn't understand mythology. That's the deal. You only can think literal.
All right, we're going on to the next question. Seven Asar. What's up, brother? Do you have a question for the brothers?
Yes, sir. We only get one question, brother.
You can ask both of them a question.
Okay. I want to say peace to you, peace to Brother Reginald, peace to Elder Yarah, and peace to everybody on the panel and on the chat. My first question goes to Elder Yarah. And Elder Yarah, my question to you is about methods and standards, since it's been proven that people who believe in the historicity of Jesus and the Bible, that the methods and standards have been moved because you have no proven contemporary sources. How can you tell me, those scholars who you claim has eyewitness account, what's the methods and the standards that you can show me, the documentation of them showing the name, either the name of the person who did the eyewitness account, or how they discern whether it's hearsay or lies? And I don't want to hear that he's known to not to say hearsay. I need documentation of how he ascertains it's not hearsay or lies. Can you do that for me, sir?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. That's a great question. I appreciate that question. Actually, if we look at one of the most prominent PhD scholars on these topics, especially on the historicity of Jesus, which is Bart Ehrman, who is not a person of faith. He's not a theologian. He does not believe, he does not follow the biblical narrative. He tells you this right away, but he studies it. He tells us, again, that there are two accounts listed in the biblical narrative, two accounts listed in many extra biblical sources that talk about, number one, the crucifixion of Jesus, number one, and the baptism of Jesus by John the Baptist, right? Those are two extra biblical accounts. And the methodology, I'm glad that you asked, because that is a very historical question. One that we didn't get all night from my brother Reginald was the fact that in the historicity, the argument, the criteria of this similarity, I'm going to repeat it again. The criteria of this similarity when proving the historical Jesus is that if there are things listed in the biblical narrative, right, that the Bible itself has no importance of having listed there or having any reason to have it listed in the biblical narrative in order to prove its historicity, the crucifixion is not necessary for the disciples to argue whether or not he was a real person. And then no one argues against it anywhere in history. Number two, the baptism of John. No one argues against it in history, right? From any scholar, right? And so these are things, two prominent events that had nothing to do with Jesus himself. He didn't facilitate the baptism. He didn't facilitate the crucifixion. So these are things that the disciples themselves needed to create to say that they knew this man. They didn't have to write about a crucifixion. They didn't have to write about his baptism. They didn't have to do those things. So based on the historical method, the method of this criteria of dissimilarity, that's how scholars prove it. His history.
Okay, I should have preferenced outside of the Bible because that's not real historical count.
All right.
But I want to ask the other brother a question, right? I could ask him a question. True?
Yeah, hey, brother.
Okay, so brother Reginald, since Elder Yarah couldn't give me the answer that I asked, because he gave me no documentation of how he ascertained whether it was hearsay or not, or no documentation of a name of the so-called eyewitness. Can you explain to me why there is no contemporary sources of Jesus, once again, and how they moved the goalposts on the standards of what historicity is when it comes to Jesus in the Bible?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if there is no historical records, no contemporary records, it's because he never existed. That's plain and simple. It's really that simple. It's really that simple. And all the people that he's talking about that says, all these contemporary, nobody argues against him. What kind of an argument is that? Nobody argues against him, the contemporaries. That makes no sense. If he didn't exist, who's going to argue against his existence? I don't understand that logic. So
yes, sir.
He didn't exist. That's why there's no contemporary records. That's plain and simple. He did not prove that.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, moving right along. We got Cosmic in the building. Cosmic saying, Kofa, what up, brother?
Hey, yo, peace. Light and love to the panel. Good. I want to say peace, brother. So how's everything? Hope everything's well and blessed. Great job to both of the panelists. I really appreciated your knowledge and your insight. I had a question for both of you, if you don't mind. Elder Yarah, can you provide any evidence of the statements of Quadratus before Eusebius, who wrote 200 to 300 years supposedly after his existence, and then nobody else really quoting what you're saying before Eusebius? Can you provide any other fathers that said that before Eusebius?
Yeah, Papias. I quoted too. Papias. They both.
Papias quoted Quadratus.
Yeah, those two have corresponding accounts that they both spoke with the eyewitnesses. So what is important is that we have two separate accounts, that there were surviving eyewitnesses to Jesus and his death. So
that's not my question.
The importance is, I understand your question. The importance is, are there eyewitnesses to Jesus' existence? Were there eyewitnesses that say he did and perform certain miracles? The extra biblical sources. The answer is yes. That was the challenge. No. Is it extra biblical sources? The problem with this brother, why he keeps shaking his head, is because he wants to argue whether or not people were writing about these things during the time that Jesus lived. Why would they? Why would they? They were there. They were there. I don't have, if you and I are standing on the street corner and you and I watch an accident occur, Brother Sankofa, do I need to write you a letter or a correspondence explaining to you what happened? I don't have to do that. You and I both were eyewitnesses. So why would there be necessary for any written correspondence to take place between us? Again, I've already proven and shown, and history tells us that this was a very localized incidents and things that occurred in the area of Galilee. They were not worldwide known, as he puts it. These were not people all over Rome, as he puts it. You don't get
said that.
Yes, you did. You said it was worldwide.
I never said it was worldwide.
Go ahead.
Elder Yarah, thank you for your response, but by not answering my question, you said no, essentially.
Well, actually, no, I did answer your question. I said that
you did not. You said you mentioned you did not answer my question. You either did not answer or did not understand my question.
I said
I'm not talking about Papias.
Support each other's argument.
I'm not talking about Papias at all. I'm asking you, is there any other person before you? I think Eusebius made this up. I understand church fathers make things up.
Well, that's not what you
I want to know, but hold a second. I want to know, is there any other person before Eusebius that quotes Quadratus?
I said Papias.
Papias quotes Quadratus?
Papias and Quadratus, they quote from the same event externally.
That's not answering the question.
Listen to what I'm telling you. They quote from the same event. Listen,
no, brother,
listen to what I'm telling you.
No, and I get what you're saying.
From the same. Listen, they quote.
I get what you're saying, brother, but you're not answering the question.
Listen, it's answering your question. Whether you want to accept the answer or not, it's answering your question. They quote the same event. They quote the same event externally, independent of each other. That's more proof. Whether or not you believe Eusebius made it up for one, how do you support that he made it up for the other?
See, Yarah, your argument is
the
other doesn't rely on
you. Going back and forth with him. Let him answer it, and then you can ask Reggie a question if you want.
Because the other does not rely on Eusebius.
Yes.
So if the other doesn't rely on Eusebius, where did he get that information from?
All right, Nick, you can ask Reggie a question if you like.
Brother, great. Okay, thank you, brother. Yarah, appreciation. Brother Reggie, are you aware of the role that Valentinus and Basilides played in the development of early Christianity, and that they studied in ancient Egypt in order to develop their systems of aeons emanating from the one?
Not them specifically, but I am aware of how the Gnostics developed their stuff. So, but them specifically and how they did it, I've never just went and studied the Gnostic stuff.
Okay, thank you.
but I understand the connections, you know. So that to me was what is more important, is just understanding how Christianity came up with what it came up with. Okay. And Brother Yarah, I didn't say it was worldwide. I said if Jesus was well known as Christians say that he is, then why is there no record? So you're putting words in my mouth, and you're really good about doing that. But I never said it was worldwide and all of that, because it wasn't worldwide. It was in one specific area. But he was known in that specific area.
I'm glad you agree.
He was making a ruckus, and that's why they wanted to execute him.
I'm glad you agree.
That's what the story is.
I'm glad you agree.
All right. We're moving on. Asar Mka in the building, the true living legend of the Kemetic science. All right, the brother who can read inside and out, who is fluent in the Kemetic, in the Mythological. Come on, Asar, what you got for both brothers?
Let me greet them first. ETE Imitep Seni Senet Anquastigen Anku Jasenev. Dua for listening to my brother sa.neter and our great panelists today, Yarah and Saber Reginald. And shout out to the panel and everybody in the chat. The first question is for our brother Reginald. You know I got to make it hard on both sides. What ancient statement do you have to say that Jesus did not exist or was made up, as you showed, from the Neteru or mythos?
Well, who said he was made up?
Yes, any ancient statement.
That
I know
statement
it myself, but I'm asking you.
Yeah, that kind of a statement does not exist, brother, because I mean, who's going to, before 1799, Christianity was doing what they were doing. Nobody really knew. So it wasn't until the discovery of the Rosetta Stone that it really started to break open. That's when people started really questioning the deal. So there's not going to be any historical references to somebody saying, or I guess putting on record, that Jesus didn't exist. So a lot of that stuff now, it's just now coming to fruition for a lot of people.
So I'm going to just reference for you and move to the next question. Go check the book of not the book of joy, the book of paradise from Tacitus. Go also check Diodorus Siculus, who makes statements concerning, and a few others. Just so you know, that's where those statements.
All right, I appreciate that. Appreciate that reference.
Yeah. Let's go to Brother Yarah. What primary resource do you have to show that Jesus existed outside of the Bible?
Primary resource, as far as as far as archaeological evidence? There's no archaeological evidence or direct document that outside of the Gospels. See, the Gospels gives us direct primary evidence. But let me put it to you this way. All scholars agree, the consensus of scholars, I should say, agree that Paul was a real person. And 7 of Paul's letters or epistles have been authenticated as being written by Paul. And in those letters, we know Paul, who is a contemporary, who lived during the time of Christ and knew of Christ, wrote about him and mentions him by name. So we have 7 letters written by the hand of someone who's actually contemporary with Paul, who lived during the same time that Jesus did. So that is the documentation that I have. Now, for this debate, in all earnest, I didn't bring those out because I didn't want the brother to cry foul after the end of this debate, because he didn't want to use the Bible, because I believe that he's aware of that. But in order to make his argument, he put that in the debate. But we know that historians all they agree, who understand that Paul was an actual figure who was a contemporary of Christ. Now, here's the fallaciousness about this contemporary argument. Contemporary does not mean I have to know you personally. It does not mean I have to have any physical contact with you, right? Contemporary doesn't only mean that I have to exist during the same time period that you lived in your particular lifespan. If we are all born in the first century, we're contemporary. If we're all born in the second century and lived during the second century, then we're second century contemporaries. This is the fallacious argument that many try to espouse in this community, among others. You have a very poor understanding of what it means to be contemporary with someone. So we know Paul knew Christ because he tried to have Christians persecuted. We know that according to his own words. We know that they were born during the same day and lived during the same time period. We have historians that say Paul's letters are authentic. You cannot be a historian, a serious historian, and dismiss them because they've been compiled. First of all, Paul's letters were not written a part of the Bible. They were inserted. So Paul's letters, although he talked about certain things, were not documents written so they can be circulated as documents of faith, but he was dealing with people who were actually being involved during that particular time because he wrote letters to people who were not of faith.
All right, moving right along. I want y'all to see
you pagan.
I want y'all to see the brother Keon on the screen. Brother Keon is indeed a bona fide Christian. And only Christians will ask questions like this. Only Christians and faith believers will ask. This is a dumb question about you. So, check your back. What are you doing? Stay on mute. Keon is a Christian, a bona fide Christian, and only Christians will ask questions like this and make statements like this. He says to you, Asar, this is such a dumb question. Why are y'all keep putting the standard that it has to be outside the Bible? Because, Brother Keon, if you say he existed, then why not prove it? Like, for example, if you say, well, did Ramesses III existed? Can you prove that Ramesses existed? Now they would have to go into Kemet and prove that there was indeed a man named Ramesses III. You see? And then they would have to prove it. Archaeology show you all the information. So when you can't prove it, this is what the Christians will say. Stuff like this. This is such a dumb question. Why do we got to prove it outside of the Bible? You see what I'm saying, Keon? Be quiet, brother.
Stop don't though, stop. And that's the funny part. Sometimes, and Yarah gives a good statement, right, concerning, right. But when you have nitwit thinking of that caliber, it shows that you don't know the difference between a primary resource and what our brother Yarah has been telling you, historicity. You don't know the difference between historicity and history. So as Saad just pointed out to you, we can go find Ramses' tomb. We can even, some say they've got his body. The particular mummy I don't agree with, but we have these things in physicality. That's a primary resource. When I ask you to have it for Jesus and you make a nitwit comment like that, you can't pull it up. You don't even have something documented to say it does. The only thing that we have is what he just pointed out, which is Paul's letters. So you should know the difference when you're talking archaeologically, primarily, and when you're in a real discussion with those of us who do these types of things. But
all right, moving on. We got our brother right here. Oh, man, the Hebrews are coming out. We got our Hebrew brother Marcus in the building. What up, Marcus?
What's going on? Can you hear me?
How you pronounce that, Chasad? How you pronounce your name? Kassad. All right, we got Kassad in the building. What's up, Kassad?
What's going on? Am I able to be heard?
Yes, we hear you.
We hear you, Kassad.
Ask your question, brother.
Hey, Asar. I liked your question, actually. I actually liked your question, which actually leads to my question. So my first question is for the brother Reginald. Where in the definition of a contemporary does it say that person has to write during the other person's lifetime?
That's just what contemporary means. It's the definition of contemporary. Now, if y'all want to move the goalposts, you can do that. But contemporary means it's in his time.
Okay. Yarah, can you pull up the definition of contemporary? Because a contemporary is someone who lived at the same time as another person. That has nothing to do with when they write.
Agreed.
So,
No,
Yarah, can
brother,
you please pull up Yarah? I'm not here to debate you. I'm not here to debate you. Yarah, can you pull up the definition of contemporary?
You're a contemporary, whether it's written record, whether it's a court record, whether it's a
Yarah,
Jewish
can you pull up the definition
those
of
are contemporary records.
He's asking me a question right now. Can I read the definition for contemporary? I'm going to read it. It says contemporary means belonging to the present or recent past, modern or existing, or happening at the same time as something else. Right? That is the definition of contemporary. So I agree with what the brother Marcus is saying. I've been saying this all night. There's this fallacious definition of contemporary. He said he can't hear. Can you hear me? Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we hear you, brother.
Well, brother, I think Marcus said he can't hear.
I said I couldn't hear. There was no audio coming through. So
okay, I'll read it again. It says contemporary means belonging to the present or recent past, modern or existing, or happening at the same time as something else. So I agree with
can you read the noun? So when you say someone is a contemporary, it's using the noun. Can you please read the noun definition
I'll read the noun
of contemporary?
It says a person who lives at the same time. A temporary can refer to a person who lived or lives during the same period as someone else.
Exactly. Right. These brothers be making up their own criteria and try to make up their own.
Hey, Marcus.
Go ahead.
You just shot yourself in the foot. That's the same thing Reggie said, brother.
No, it's two different things.
Yes,
what Reggie said was they have to write during their lifetime.
They have to write.
That's not what contemporary means. I could be a contemporary with you and not write during your lifetime. I can write after you die. I'm still a contemporary with you because I lived at the same time that you lived.
Facts.
He's making up his own criteria for a contemporary.
That's what I've been saying all night. They don't understand the definition
Y'all just said the same thing I asked for. I said there was a contemporary that was during his time. That's a contemporary. I don't
you said writing. You said writing. That's a difference. You said writing during his time.
Writing somebody, if it was a person that was writing about Jesus as a contemporary. I'm saying the same thing. Y'all trying to like dice this up, and contemporary is contemporary.
Right, contemporary. I agree. Contemporary is contemporary, but they don't have to have a required writing. And so when I talk about that, there are eyewitnesses who were recorded.
Y'all playing games
during the time that he lived. Hold on, you just agreed with us that there were eyewitnesses who were contemporary with Christ. During the time that he was living, recorded in history. Those are contemporaries.
Yes.
Okay. So we showed you that tonight.
So let me say something.
No,
because
you didn't.
I'm not the debater, so I'm gonna let them work this out. But let me say this, and I'm gonna fall back really quick. Right. So I listened very close. I didn't watch the entire debate. I missed the first round. I missed the opening, but I caught from the second half and on. When Yarah presented information, right? The brother Reginald specifically said, you have to show me something from 0 to 33 CE of Jesus' lifetime. If it's outside of that, if that writing is not in that time span, he was not accepting it as evidence because it's not in the lifespan of Jesus. That is not how you define a contemporary. I can write outside of his lifespan as long as I live during his lifespan. I am a contemporary with that person. So when he said we don't have any contemporary writings, that is completely incorrect. Paul is a contemporary with Jesus. Mark is a contemporary with Jesus. They are documented in Salakia. Mark is documented in history and he is a contemporary of Jesus. Matthew is documented in history and is a contemporary of Jesus. Those are contemporary writings. Point blank,
They're
period.
not using the Bible, brother.
But you said there was no contemporary writing.
This is circular
That's
argument.
why your argument, bro, is bad, bro. You can't even be honest
circular
about
argument.
history.
Your argument is bad because it's about mythology, brother. That's I said he wasn't historical.
All right, hold on, y'all. Let's move on. Let's move on. Rebel is in the building.
Horrible.
Rebel, you got the floor, brother. What's up? Do you have a question?
Yeah, blessed. Give thanks to the panel, and blessed to brother Reginald, and you don't know, big up yourself, brother Elder Yarah. Big up yourself, sa.neter. You don't know. Yeah, but I'm listening to the conversation. I'm listening to the discussion, the debate, and to me, Elder Yarah is going in circles because he's not proving the historicity, but he's going around and around and saying, you know, this person say they believe, and he's all dealing with probability. So my question to Elder Yarah is, do you believe that you had really proved what the debate topic is all about, or you just going around in circles?
No, you're going around in circles because I never offered any information about a believer. That's why I didn't go. I stayed within the brother's criteria. Don't speak while I'm talking, because I never went into the Bible. Unlike this brother, who didn't want the Bible brought into the debate, but he still went to the Bible. So to stay within the honest requirements that his challenge that he put out, I didn't go into the Bible. So I never used a believer. This is what y'all not hearing. I never used anyone who said or claimed to be a believer. I only use sources, extra biblical sources, of people recording those who only claim to be eyewitnesses. They never say they were recording believers.
If they claimed to see it, claiming to see something and seeing something it's like a big difference. I could claim I was in the time of Jesus, but at the end of the day, I don't know who he is. I didn't see him. I didn't relate. I didn't talk to him just because I was like people saying that. So claiming something doesn't mean that it's the artifact. It's the real reason why you're trying to prove it. But you will try to say that you're proving the point. But Dr. Reginald or Mr. Reginald went in to show you the history of the allegories, the history of the myth, where it came from, and how it was extrapolated. But at the same time, you're not trying to see that because you've been clocked up in that Hebrew, that kind of religious dogmatic mindset. So you're not seeing the physical and you're not seeing the spiritual. That's why I see it really.
Well, actually, I'm not caught up in that.
To Reginald.
Well, actually,
I give it to Reginald, really.
Well, actually, I'm not caught up in that at all, because what I said directly to the brother, and this is why you need to pay better attention, especially when I speak, is that the only thing that he presented were assumptions. He has no historical proof or documentation that any Christian, Israelite, Jew, or anyone copied from the stories or knowledges of ancient Kemet. It does not exist. That's all made up. Simply because I say I got 2 pieces of fruit in the basket and I hand you an orange. And then you say, well, only thing left in that basket has to be oranges. But when you look in there, there's an apple. Simply because you see 2 things that are similar does not make them the same. That's simple. That's simple. And I also showed that his argument about things originating from Kemet is false, because I showed you African spirituality going back 100,000 years that did not originate in ancient Kemet, that we can show the same types of similarities that exist. So that argument is false.
All right, moving right along. We got Vernon, let's go. And we got one more question before these brothers close out and get on with their day. Vernon, let's go. You got the floor.
Yeah, I appreciate it, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, brother. We hear you.
Okay. Hey, peace to the panel. Hey, my question is for Brother Yarah. Brother Yarah, the Jesus that is depicted in the Bible, we're looking for outside evidence of this Jesus depicted in the Bible. So my first question to you would be, do you agree that the Jesus depicted in the Bible, that the works he brought forth in the Bible would also exist outside the Bible?
Yes, to a degree, yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, one of the works that Jesus did in the Bible was he brought forth a kingdom, a government. What evidence of this kingdom exists outside of the Bible?
Well, if you ask many people like that today, actually, our great brother, our great leader, General Yohana, is going to be coming on sa.neter soon. He'll tell you that he's part of that kingdom. Our brother Tazariak, who's coming on, is going to tell you he's a part of that kingdom. I myself today is evidence we are part of that kingdom. There are many other Israelites, and some Christians will even tell you that. The Catholic Church today will tell you they're part of that kingdom today. So if you're looking for physical evidence, the physical evidence exists if you're talking about an actual kingdom. And so the understanding of that actual kingdom is found within the biblical narrative, but outside the biblical narrative, you see we are all vying for a part of that actual physical kingdom. And if you study the biblical narrative, our expectations of what that physical kingdom will look like is what we often talk about on this channel. When we talk about just last night,
I'm sorry, you're giving me your faith. Maybe I should rephrase the question. I'm looking for evidence. I'm looking for physical evidence of this. No, you gave me what people believe. I'm asking you, what is the physical?
We are a part of that physical kingdom. That's what I'm telling you. And because you have a lack of belief,
so
that's your.
So once again, you just said belief. You said I have a lack of belief, and I'm asking you,
I said that's
what is the evidence that? Okay, then what? Then Elder Yahweh, what is the evidence that supports your belief that actually shows evidence of a kingdom that differentiates? Hold on, let me finish my question, Doc.
No, because he's going to answer your question. Go ahead, finish.
Okay, what I'm asking for is, what is the objective evidence of a physical kingdom that actually points to the existence of Jesus, since he is the king of this kingdom? What is the actual objective evidence of this kingdom outside of the Bible that is not predicated subjective to your faith?
Well, it's not subjective, it's objective. We have an objective as being a part of that physical kingdom. And I myself is your proof. I'm a part of that physical kingdom. Don't you see me? Flesh and blood, corporeal. I'm a part of that physical kingdom. And as a part of that physical kingdom, like many others, that is the evidence that we have, right? We have, just like any other civilization or kingdom, we have an attested king, we have a law, we have a way of living, we have a land that we believe we have been dispersed of, we have a language. Anything that you can find today that will give you the evidence of any other kingdom that you says exists. We have a government that's been established. We have those things physically today and always have had those things. So I am a part of that physical kingdom. So I'm your evidence. And any other
right.
So if you have a government,
that's it, brother. That's it. Brother Gideon, last question. Turn on your camera, brother. You got the cam up.
You can take me off the big screen, sir. I appreciate you.
Brother Gideon, cam up. This is the last and final question before these two brothers close out. All right, Brother Gideon, make it good, man. I can't hear you.
Shalom. What's going on, sir? How you doing?
Please, brother.
Yeah, what's good? All praises to the Most High in the name of Yahshua. I want to shout out to my brother, Elder Yarah. Great job.
Peace and
As
blessings.
always, you know, you come with the information. You definitely prove the point. To the other brother, you know, definitely appreciate your time. You know what I'm saying? But there's a lot of things that you said that I want to ask a question. Would you agree that the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence? I've heard you. I'm quite sure you're familiar with that, right?
You asking Brother Reggie the question?
Yeah.
All right.
Do you
Would I
believe
agree
that?
the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence?
Correct.
Yeah, that's a play on words. I don't get it. Help me with that.
Okay, so
What do you mean by that?
I can understand that from hearing what you've been saying. So I'll explain it to you.
Yeah, I want you to help me understand what you mean.
Right. So when you don't have evidence of something not being there specifically, that's the absence of that evidence. So if you don't have nothing concretely saying something to the point you're trying to make, that's the absence of the evidence, right? So if you don't have that present, you then cannot turn around and say that's the evidence of absence of that point, correct? Would you agree with that?
Yeah,
say for instance,
I bought a jacket. I don't get that. I don't get that
okay,
logic.
I'm gonna break it down more. If I bought a jacket and I lost the receipt, that's the evidence of me purchasing it, right?
Okay.
Okay. Now, does that prove I did not buy that? That's what I'm trying to tell you. So the absence of any evidence.
No. Hold on. You says does that prove that you did not buy it?
Right. If I lost the receipt and I do not have it anymore after I bought the jacket, does me not having that receipt proves I did not buy it? Exactly. So when you made the statement that Pontius Pilate, there's no records of Yeshua being executed by Pontius Pilate, then the onus is on you to show every crucifixion that Pontius Pilate did and the type of records that you're asking for. If you can't show that and if you can't prove that, that again is absence of evidence, not evidence of absence. Okay, but let me ask you this. Let me ask you this and I'm gonna close out. I'm asking this and I'm gonna close out.
No, let me answer that first.
Okay, go ahead, my brother.
Pontius Pilate existed, and he was the governor that supposedly executed him, and he had no record. You're telling me that I can't say that because he had no record, then that means that most likely Jesus did not exist?
Most likely.
He had no record.
Exactly, correct. So, okay, do you have any records? Do you have every record of every person Pontius Pilate executed? I'm just asking because I'm trying to show you a methodology.
Record of Jesus. I don't need to prove everybody that he executed. That was his job.
No,
there was only one record that needed to be done. That's a ridiculous question.
If you're standing on the fact that there's no records of Pontius Pilate executing Yeshua as evidence of him not being crucified or even existing, you would have to then show us, because I can show you every person that Pontius Pilate crucified. It's simple.
No.
It's very simple.
You're asking for something that nobody else can even confirm. All you need is one record that he did it. That's it.
But your flawed methodology.
You're trying to bring in all this other stuff, man. You're making the argument more difficult than it needs to be. Prove that Pontius Pilate executed. Even the Bible said he did that, but there's no record. We got record of Pontius Pilate.
You just mentioned the record. That's what I'm saying. So your flawed methodology is segueing to this, right?
No, brother, I didn't mention the record. I said that it was done in the Bible. This is that circular argument again.
The romanticism.
You cannot say that Jesus existed because Pontius Pilate existed.
Okay.
That's
the romanticism that you just provided for us over this last hour is the reason why the methodology fails. You said, and the itching ears, they fall for it because it sounds like it's true, but it's not. One case was when you said that Egyptian religion, everybody is divine. that's false. That's categorically false. Whereas Yeshua speaks, and not only Yeshua, but Yahweh speaks that everybody who comes into his covenant is special. So that was a failed parallel that you tried to make with the Bible. So can you show us where
everybody is born wicked and sinful?
Can you show us where everyone is divine in the Kemetic religion?
I just did, bro. It's just a natural progression. We are all the part of the one. If the one is divine, then we are too. Because
so the slaves killed with the.
It's just a natural progression. It's logic.
Nothing what he said tonight. Just a bunch of mumbo jumbo.
You're on mute, sa.neter.
Yeah, nobody. We can't hear you, Sa.
All right, I want to say thank you to everybody coming through, asking y'all a question. We are now in the final stage. We are in the final stage of this debate, and that is the closing part. Brother Reginald, you got 5 minutes in your closing. And when you close, please remain here until Elder Yarah close, and then we are out of here.
All right.
All right.
So,
okay, Brother Reggie.
So again,
you can use your PowerPoint if you want to, or you could just close out.
No, I'll just close.
Okay. Time
so,
stops.
So again, the criteria is that there was contemporary evidence of an execution, a Jewish record, a Roman record, a Pontius Pilate record, somebody that wrote a letter about the miracle of Jesus, just normal natural things. If there was 5,000 people at one of his miracles, and not one letter or anything from those contemporary 5,000 people, I mean, what is it? Okay. So all Brother Yarah gave was, again, evidence that was 50, 100, 300 years after about them writing about Jesus or writing about Christians talking about Jesus. And that is supposed to be proof. None of that is proof. He talked about there's a consensus of scholars. The scholars are apologetics. They're not what's the word I'm looking for? They are not those people want to prove Jesus too. Okay, so they're not in this instance. They want to do the same thing that he's trying to do. Use their faith to prove him. There's still no records. He didn't prove it. Plain and simple. And then when I show that there is a link from the mythology to Jesus, he's saying I'm talking about the Bible. I mean, I'm talking about the myth. I said he was mythology. That's what I was expressing. I could have went along a whole lot longer with all of that, but I mean, it's the bottom line is Jesus comes from the composite of Osiris, and Horus. That's where the mythology came from, through the Greeks. That was proven. And he's saying there's no links. So he doesn't understand mythology, and he doesn't understand how mythology works. Literalism is where he lives in his mind. That's all he can comprehend. Mythology is deep. It's nuanced. So, I mean, he didn't prove what he said he could prove. Circumstantial evidence, that's all he gave. If that. So, I'm good.
All right. Moving right along. Brother Elder Yarah, you got 5 minutes in your closing argument. Time will start when you're ready, brother.
Yeah, no worries. Peace to the brother Reginald. Nothing personal, just only about the information. At the end of the day, he just so eloquently stated that I provided evidence to support my argument. Even if he wants to say it's circumstantial evidence is actually admissible in court. This is the problem. What I understand about people who don't really have an understanding in the background in legalism and the legal system, especially in this. I have that is my actual career, right? Is that I've been involved in the legal system. As you're an entrepreneur, sir, I'm an entrepreneur.
I'm my own boss. And I work in the legal field, litigation, subrogation, right? So I've been involved in those fields for over 20 years. So I clearly understand what it means to be, what it is to make a legal argument, right? So at the end of the day, when he says I provided evidence, evidence is evidence. Now you can disagree with the evidence, but the evidence is supported by fact. And you yourself said all he showed was evidence for this. Yes, evidence for what I said I would do. Now, he hasn't shown us any evidence for what he believes is a connection from ancient Kemetic spiritual systems to the composition of a Jesus figure. He has no evidence to show that that happened. He only can give you his assumption, what he thinks would happen. He argues against, as a matter of fact, he wanted to argue right off the bat and handicap the debate to simply say, well, you can't use anything from the Bible, even though he's already said himself, there are historical things in the Bible, but the Bible is not a history book. I agree with that. It's not a history book, but there are historical things. The consensus of scholars who are not theologians, whom I quoted throughout this debate, specifically Bar Ehrman, who is not a Christian apologist, I've quoted him 4 times in this debate, simply says Jesus was an historical figure. He's not an apologist. Look him up. I'm sure you're not familiar. Based on certain criteria, it's specifically based on the historical method, on historical methodology. You've given us no methodology for your argument all night. All night. No methodology. Nothing, no one in academia, nothing, no one in the scholastic field can take seriously. You've given us none of that. All you've given us is theories. You yourself said, I presented evidence. All you've presented is theories. You yourself said circumstantial evidence. Still evidence, but all you presented is theories. You must go back and hone your argument better. Because
I don't need an education from you, brother. Just make your point.
Hey,
yo, Reggie, you can't
man,
talk.
I know it
This
hurts.
is clothing.
I know.
Okay,
it hurts. It hurts.
You got a minute and 20 seconds, y'all.
I got you. It hurts, but it's okay. Hey, listen, I'll give you my information. I'll help you make it through. I'm just that kind of a guy. Right? So when we talk about what is actually history, which is what this debate should have been based on, not theoretical arguments. I didn't give you any theoretical arguments. I didn't give you any opportunities to say that I gave you a theoretical argument. That's why I didn't quote anything from the Bible that could have proven, as our brother Good Yashar posed the question, what historical evidence do I have from the time that Jesus actually lived, bled, and died? I could have quoted Paul's letters, who historians say was an actual real historical figure who've authenticated at least 7 of his letters to be written by his own hand. First-hand documentation that you've been clamoring for all night. But to be honest and have some integrity about the debate challenge you put out there, I said, okay, I'll go into this debate and I'll show him the extra biblical sources, and I won't go into the actual primary sources that Brother Asar actually had me to bring out. So outside of this debate, there are actual handwritten contemporary sources during the lifetime that Jesus lived.
This is the toughest environment to be in, and we're busting pinatas. You are in the house of consciousness, God damn it.
All right, man. I want to say thank you to both brothers. Y'all did y'all thing, and we leave it up to the people For those of y'all who want to go ahead and see the chart, the polls is in there. Thank both of y'all for coming through, Elder Yarah and my brother Reginald Martin. Thank y'all. Peace and blessings, y'all. Y'all can see yourself out.
Shalom.
True, my alpha, AGS Damari. Y'all know what time it is. Place your bets.
What's up, man? How am I sounding now? Oh, you sound good right now. Oh, it's still on.
You saw sideline. Yeah, I got plenty motion. You still an echo? I'm in the HOK, sourced up and ready. I got the drop on every op. Yeah, who wanna test me? The bait Coliseum. You see those sideline. Yeah, I got plenty motion. You blind, lead the blind. I'm in the HOK, sourced up and ready. I got the drop on every op. Yeah, who wanna test? Stepper with a cane and top had to match. A Lord of Ice, supreme ruler. That's right in his act. Double or nothing, 2 for 1. That's how I'm coming. Do the math and do the knowledge. I'm March 100. And I stay reppin' at 5. Who wanna see me live? Got a murder man vibe. Bodies in my archive. When I up my source, just up the score cause it's a rap. And I be that more. You gon' remember he was cap called blabber lacking in his babble. Ran down on him.
All right. Yo, to let y'all know, General Yohana will be stepping in the ring. Captain Tazoriak leader, he will be stepping in the ring. This is going to be a hell of a debate. And Brother La said he can't wait for the live debates to come. And this one, I think I might make this a live debate at the El Humba Ballroom, because this is the commanding General Yohana coming out to debate Pastor Manning. So I'll be ready for this one. This one right here is going to be live. I know the place is going to be jumping. I know the place is going to be going crazy. And, I will be putting General Yohana face right there where the question mark is at. It was supposed to be Tazoriak, but Tazoriak ran home and got his teacher to deal with this one. He got his teacher to deal with this debate coming up. So, see y'all when I get this new flyer up and running. And I will be putting the date up as soon as possible and give y'all some rundown. Peace and blessings, y'all. We out.